Hi, I'm John Mark. Welcome to the Beaten Zone. This podcast is about war, not from the top down, but from the ground up. It's about unearthing personal truths of war, its lessons, its costs, and how it shapes the lives of the people who experienced it firsthand. I couldn't be more excited about today's episode. We pick up where we left off with our conversation with retired Lieutenant Colonel Asad Genghis Khan, United States Marine Corps. He will talk about this very unique 9/11 story and his incredible journey as one of the first Americans on the ground in Afghanistan in 2001. What he shares is a remarkable view of the early days of the campaign, and I guarantee it will capture your attention and provoke real thought about our approach there. Genghis will also reflect on the tragic events that unfolded in Kabul as the United States and its allies withdrew from Afghanistan and how they propelled him into the public space to call for accountability and reform in the military. Since getting to know Genghis, I have developed a deep respect for him and his work. One of our goals is to develop a community of interest in military affairs informed by diversity of thought and open mindedness. Before we begin, a reminder to please like, subscribe, and comment below if you enjoy this channel. Doing so helps the channel generate engagement needed to qualify for programs that will support my nonprofit work. As a reminder, 100% of any monetization that comes from this program will go to Operation Freedom Pause. And now, retired Lieutenant Colonel Asad Genghis Khan, United States Marine Corps. All right, Genghis, it's great to have you back, man. Fantastic first session, and we're just going to go ahead and dive right in. So where were you on 9/11?
Yeah, so 9/11. So I just left the MACTAF staff training program. I'd been command selected, and I was sent down to 2nd Marine Division. Now, the way the Marine Corps rotation works is you're command selected a year out, right, to replace the individual that's in that battalion. So there's only 8 battalions that are, generally infantry. I'm talking, so that rotate commanders out. So I knew I'd have to go sit on the division staff, and I went down to 2nd Marine Division, and I was a division plans officer, given my background in doctrine and, working at the MACTAF staff training program and the School of Advanced Warfighting. So I got basically put into a vault, and you know the deal. As that's our planning room, and we had about a dozen, war plans that we're responsible for 2nd Marine Division. Now, so people don't realize the amount of work it takes to keep those plans updated, and primarily in the TIDFIT side, the time phase force deployment data. We always have to upgrade all the rosters and equipment and load cycles and all that stuff. So you're fairly busy. So I'd probably had a team of probably about 6 or 7 people that we basically maintained the plans. And then on 9/11, my gunnery sergeant Cross comes in. He goes, "Hey, sir, turn on the TV," and which is very unlike me because I never have a TV on. We got work to do. So he turns it on, and I see the first aircraft hit. And quite frankly, like many Americans, I thought, hey, it's a mistake. Something happened. I didn't think twice about it. And 15 minutes later, the second aircraft hits, and we're like, holy shit, right? And then about half an hour later, or an hour later, you see the third aircraft, and then the fourth one in Pennsylvania, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we knew something was going on, right? And in my experience, now 4 years earlier, when I was at the Naval War College, I actually wrote a thesis on jihadism, right? Given my background, being a foreign area officer and all that. And I talked about the root causes of jihadism. And so I knew that, it was going to happen because the Cole incident had happened, the embassy bombings had happened. So we were just working our way up towards it. And the World Trade Center had been targeted once before. If you remember, there's a truck bomb that they brought in the basement, trying to blow it up. So it was expected, right? But what we didn't realize is the scale of this thing. How the hell can 19 terrorists, you know, get inside the United States, attend flight school, and work through airport security and take over these aircrafts and do what they did? And so that's one part. So it was a massive security breach, right? Then the other part was Osama bin Laden was our man. People have forgotten that part, right? In the 1980s, during the Soviet-Afghan War, he was our point man to get resources from the Gulf states. And, so there's a great lesson in this. You play with snakes, eventually you're going to get bit. And so we have to assume some responsibility also, of how this jihadism is created, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we sort of fuel and, support this on the periphery? And I can go into discussion about ISIS in Iraq and Anbar awakening. Maybe when we talk about later on, I'll sort of hit that. So I think it's very important that. So for me, it was I knew as soon as I saw those airplanes hit that I'm out of here. Because being a foreign area officer for the Middle East and South Asia, and that's exactly what happened. So right after the next day, I got a phone call. Hey, report down to Central Command. But it took a couple of days because my commanding general hadn't approved it, and so it took a couple of days to figure that out. And once I got approval for that, I told Gunnery Sergeant Cross, my plans chief, to make my travel arrangements. And so it was a very circuitous route that he picked. I was like going from I believe from Raleigh Durham to like Michigan to California, because the airspace was shut down. So it was kind of a weird thing. I was like, Gunny, come on, man, I'm just trying to get down to Florida. And so he said, okay, sir, I'll try again. But as he's walking out, he said, sir, I don't, the way you look, I don't even know if I can get you on an airplane. And he's being a smart, typical gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, right? So,
Mhm.
and it was a great point. It's a light bulb moment. I said, okay, fine, don't worry about it. I'll just drive down there. It's easier for me to drive down to Tampa. So that's what I did. So I went down to Tampa, and and I was put it. And this is probably around 15, 16 September. I'm down there, and you could tell. You walk in the jock, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And so we had Operation Southern Watch and stuff that were sort of monitoring Iraq. Wasn't really a huge issue because primarily we had CENTCOM air forces were down there, sort of overwatching Iraq. And Iraq really hadn't done much by that point, right? Everything had tamped down. And the other thing they really looked at were the launch baskets for the Tomahawks, right? Where are the launch baskets? You kind of monitored that. Where can you launch these missiles from? And I don't want to go into that too much because I was trying to get in the gray area. So all this is going on. So they put me in the cell to plan the initial operations in Afghanistan, and there's nothing there. I mean, so they basically cobbled together a team. This is your planning team. Take it. And my chief of plans, a colonel, gave me a laptop. I didn't have a computer, because it's all classified space. So I need a classified computer. And he said, Genghis, he goes, don't screw that computer up. It's the president's computer.
Wow.
And I thought he was BSing me, right? And later on, when I turned it on, sure as hell it was the president's computer. So that's, because we didn't have the resources. That's what we started planning on. And like 2 days later, I had to give the brief to the deputy sync, General DeLong, Marine Lieutenant General, and, his council of generals, all the directors. And so we went in there and I started giving the brief. And, and I'm hearing some stupid, stupid ideas that people are coming up with, like dropping Qurans out of the back of an airplane, and I'm sitting there standing thinking, you got to be shitting me. Quran is a holy book, right? It's a word of God, and if you drop it onto the ground, they'd be offended. So and you let the discussion go on because every general and colonel is trying to make points in front of the desync and all that, trying to look smart, in my view. And so I'm kind of leaning on the podium, and General DeLong finally asked my opinion. So I said, sir, the Taliban are students, they're scholars, they're not the old Mujahideens. I said, we're going to cut through them, no problem. But if in the process we lose Pakistan, I said, World Trade Center is going to be an afterthought. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, I know these jihads, going back to my paper. I know their mentality. And I said, if we lose Pakistan, they've got strategic weapons. And I know these people will use them. And you could just see his brain the problem just went from this to this, became a regional issue, right? And he said, you're talking Armageddon, Colonel. And, now I remember the brief's supposed to be 45 minutes. I'm 2.5 hours into it. My arm's leaning on the podium. And, shame on me. I was a little flippant. And I said, your words, not mine, General. And he lost it. He threw me out, and I remember getting thrown out of the briefing room and I heard, get me a Jedi Knight instead of this guy,
A Samster?
Yeah. So, what he didn't realize is I was a Jedi Knight. I'd went with Saul. I'd written the doctrinal, and plus I was a fail and all this stuff, right? So I'm thinking, okay, holy shit, no problem. I'll just pack up my stuff and go back to Legion. I had basically a shoebox worth of, crayons and stuff that Marines normally walk around with. And so I'm packing my stuff, and my 1-star comes on. He goes, where are you going, Genghis? I said, sir, I'm going back to Legion. He fired me. Because he didn't fire you. He just got pissed off. He wants to see you. So I went out to see him thinking he's going to chew my ass, right? Again. and he said, basically, I want you to, get over there. So I'm like, to do what, sir? He goes, I don't know, just get over there and just be my eyes and ears. So I said, okay. So I went back, reported to Marcent, and really good guys, very supportive, the people there. And one old colonel basically said, hey, you're going to need some comm equipment. So take, a stew phone with you, an iridium, and all this stuff, right? And but don't lose it. The stew is you know, obviously crypto and all this shit. So I'm like, okay, whatever. I throw it in a backpack. And what had happened was, this is an interesting moment. I think Sato, the travel people, right? In those
Yep.
days, if I remember correctly, they gave me a one-way ticket to Pakistan because that's the point of entry. And I'm thinking in my mind, shit, I need a open-ended return ticket that I can go into any airline and, cash it in and fly my ass out of there in case something happens. They said, no, you can't because your orders are in excess of 6 months or some bullshit like that. So, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So I went back to Marcent to talk to the colonel and see if he could do anything. Well, while I'm waiting, the colonel wasn't in. All of a sudden, somebody puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, I'm really proud of you, son. You're going to war for our country. And I turned around. It's a one-star, a general, really good guy, uh, Castle. And, so I said, hey, thank you, sir. And he goes, you need anything, you holler. I'm really proud of you. So I said, well, sir, and as a matter of fact, I do. This is what I need. So he goes, so he tells one of his gunnery sergeants, he goes, go on down there. And he goes, you tell him, I not only want him to have a return ticket, but I want him to fly business class. He's going to war, I'm thinking, holy shit, that's the Marines. And so that's what happened. So I get on a plane, so I quickly flew back to DC, said goodbye to my family, and got on a plane from Dulles to Heathrow, right? Because the only flight going into Pakistan was from London, and I land in London, and there's a freaking line a mile long for the Pakistan International Airlines plane, and I finally make my way up, and people are fighting for seats, so I pull out my official passport. So I had the blue and the maroon passport, and I show it to the guy. The guy kind of looks at it, opens it, looks at me, and he knew something's going on. So he gives me a seat, but I have to pay $20. So I said, "Why do I have to pay anything? The ticket's fully funded." So he goes, "No, we got special insurance." So I'm like, "Okay." So sorry, 20 pounds, yours, whatever the British. I think it was pounds in those days.
Mhm.
And so I pull out, and 20 pounds is like $27 or whatever the hell it was, right? It was more than $20. So I only had 2 20s on me. So I pull it out, I give it to him. He's like, I can't take dollars. So I'm like, you got to be shitting me. I said, what do I do? And so he said, you got to go to the exchange place. I'm thinking, if I lose my spot in this line, there's no way in hell I'm going to get my spot back. So I turn around to the guy behind me. I said, hey, I'll give you $40 for 20-pound note. He's thinking, shit, I'm going to make some money off this dude. So he hands me a 20-pound note. I give it to the airlines. I get on the plane. I land in Islamabad, and I knew the place really well because, as I mentioned, I'd done a lot of narcotics, kind of drug operations. I knew Islamabad pretty well. Going there to support the government at the time. And so I land there, and now I'm thinking, shit, I've got all this stuff in my backpack, which I don't even know if it's legal or not, right? And so what I did was I timed my exit out of the airport because the customs, hawks are there waiting to catch you and make some money on the side and all this. You know how it works in a lot of these countries. And so I just waited for this family with, trolleys full of suitcases, and the customs guys come over here. They got their target. So I basically went around them, put my luggage in the X-ray machine, my checked-in luggage, and I kept my backpack on. Nobody noticed it. And I just kept walking. I come out of the airport, and I'm looking around for the typical embassy Suburbans. Nothing out there. So I was like, Jesus, now what do I do? So I'm thinking, okay, I'll take a cab. So I got on a cab. I told him to take me to Serena Hotel in excuse me, the airport's in Rawalpindi to Islamabad, which is about 30 minutes away. And then once we got to Serena Hotel, I was started getting a direction, take a left, right, right. And then finally we couldn't drive anymore because of police checkpoints. I got out, grabbed my stuff, and I just walked to the embassy. That was very, very interesting, because nobody gotten any word that the embassy shut down. All the non-essential people are gone, and who the hell is this guy walking up, dragging a suitcase, and so I show him my ID, and there's like, we got nothing on you. So they call for the post Marines because they're inside in the Chancery building. They come out, and this young kid starts asking me, sir, how many boot camps does the Marine Corps have? So I'm like, two, Paris Island and MCRD San Diego, you know. Who's the grand old man of the Marine Corps? Archibald Henderson, you know. How many buttons on a dress blue? And it's finally, it's like, fuck off, man. Let me in. So, so they let me in, and so basically, I said any other military personnel, and there were a few other military officers. So, I asked everybody to come down to the conference room and start introducing each other. And there's a guy standing there, probably my age at the time. Who are you? What's your name? He goes, my name's Ron Sams. And, I said, do you have a rank? He goes, yeah, I'm a brigadier general. So I was like, holy shit, sir, you're in charge. This is great. So we kind of cobbled together this L&O cell, and those guys did fantastic. I tell you what, everyone was a hero because nobody really knew what the hell was going on, But and the Air Force guys are very, very smart, and I'll tell you, and people don't realize you just don't start bombing a country,
Mhm.
right? Because once you start launching planes in their airspace, forget the threat, anti-air threat that they may have. But despite that, if a pilot has to eject, something goes wrong with an airplane, you need CSAR capability,
Mhm.
right? And you can't have CSAR capability back on the carriers and stuff. It's got to be close to the border, as close as possible. So we identified some bases that we wanted. I won't name them. That we wanted to have CSAR capability positioned in Pakistan before the bombing started, right? On October 11th timeframe, 10/11, based on what time zone you're in. So we're run out of time. So we established this. We negotiate this with the Pakistanis, and they asked me, how many aircraft? So I said, 5 to 7. How many people? About 300. We ended up having 70 aircraft at this one base with nearly 5,000 people.
Hmm.
So I mean, this thing just mushrooms. When the U.S. shows up, it's like a gorilla showing up. So everything just expands, and the Pakistanis are sort of looking at me. And there's one general, I loved him, Pakistani general, probably one of the most, proficient generals I've ever met. He had command presence. He was smart, and he just knew how to ask the right questions. And he used to always tell me, he goes, "This is the best America could send me, somebody like you, right?" Because my math was always off, right? It was a reason why math was off because you could never give him the real numbers, right?
Mhm.
And so my response was, "Hey, sir, I went to elementary school in Pakistan. That's where I learned my math." And so we had this great relationship, really good guy, and he really helped us out incredibly. So we basically set that up. Now you got to keep in mind, once we start bombing, everybody starts coming out of Afghanistan, right? You got refugees coming out, you got insurgents coming out, so everybody's just fleeing from there. And so we had to establish a plan really quick. And so ultimately we had 65,000 Pakistani troops establish a screen line along that border, the western border of Pakistan. I remember the mountains, right? The mountain ranges. And that was a big deal because Pakistan and India were at odds, right? So they had to move their forces from the east to the west. It was a huge deal. And we have to get some guarantees that if India starts moving some of their brigades or their mechanized divisions towards Pakistan, we'd fair warn them, right? Because they have to be able to defend their country and all that stuff. So while all this is going on and the bombing starts and these people start coming across, and the guidance that we had was capture any foreigner, non-Afghan, right? We don't want non-Afghans or the locals. We don't want them, but we want any foreigners, specifically Arabs. That's what we're looking for, right? Al Qaeda. That's the thinking. So they started detaining all these people, and I'll go into that later on. Eventually, they ended up having several hundred of them, right? And that became a problem.
Mhm.
So while all this is going on, the bombing starts, and then we worked with. Now you got operations in the north going on, with the special forces. We all know about that, the horsemen and all that stuff. In the south, the Marines were supposed to come in, Task Force 58, with Jim Mattis. And so we had to work with the Pakistanis. So initially, I got a call, "Hey, we're coming in, and this is what we're going to do." So I said, "Well, you got to negotiate with Pakistan. It's a sovereign country." But the thinking at the time was, "Hey, we're giving them aid, so they're going to do exactly what we want them to do." This is the thinking, right? The reality is we weren't giving them any aid. They were
Mhm.
under sanctions because of the Pressler Amendment, right? And but nonetheless, but you have to show respect, right? So and I told him, and I explained this to this colonel. I said, I don't think you know what you're talking about. We're not getting them any aid. He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, they're under sanctions, man. They're not getting any aid. So evidently, Mattis heard about that, gets on the phone and talks to me. He goes, hey, Genghis, this is what I want. I need this, this, and this. So I said, sir, if that's what you want, you got to fly over here and brief them face to face so you can build trust and confidence. And Mattis was pretty good about it. So he flew over there a few times, met with the Pakistani general, and they came up with a plan. And the plan was that the Marines were, our helicopters could not get to Afghanistan unless they refueled. So we needed a FARP site en route. So we
Hmm.
established that. And the other issue was, we had to be able to land the Marines in Pakistan ashore and then move them, lily pad them into Afghanistan with helicopters. So we ended up, a place called, yeah, a place called in southern Pakistan. They were landing. We're putting them into these pre-metal hangars. Spend the night there and or the day because they couldn't get out because we don't want the locals to be able to see them, right?
Hmm.
And then the following night, the helicopters come in, pick them up, and take them to Afghanistan, right? And so we started that rotation, and this went on for weeks and months at a time, going in and coming out. So Pakistan was very helpful with establishing these bases and supporting the Marines landing into southern Afghanistan. So while all that is going on, I get called in. So I'm also, because of my language skills and my clearances, the first casualty of the war, believe it or not, was not a military person. It was a civilian who, poor guy had a heart attack. So while I'm sitting in my LNO, this liaison cell that we just cobbled together, somebody knocks on the door to talk to me. And he's like, hey, we need your help. I'm like, for what? We need to get a body out of here. So all I'm thinking in my mind is, these people killed somebody or something. I said, you got to tell me what's going on before I get involved. So they tell me that this guy had a heart attack, died, and they need to evacuate his body. I said, sure, we'll make it work. So I worked with the Pakistanis to allow us to land a plane at nighttime in Rawalpindi, the same airport. And so we escorted his remains and they loaded him on the airplane, and he went home. And while I'm standing there talking to these people, and they're like, "Hey," because I'm talking to locals, they said, "Hey, you know how to speak local language?" I go, "Yeah, shit. What kind of clearance you got?" I get, top clearance. And do you mind working with us? So I said, "Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, I'll help you guys. It's one team." So I ended up being one of their interpreters in these interrogations and shit, right?
Hmm.
And so that kept me busy. That was like my side show, right? Aside from coordinating all these activities and all that stuff. So we spent a lot of time with them over there, and then so I mean, it went pretty well. Then one day I get called in by Ambassador Chamberlain was awesome. I mean, she was just phenomenal. Her dad was a Marine colonel, and she sort of adopted me as her colonel. She used to call me my colonel, and tough lady. So she calls me in one day, and she's like, get in. She goes, she looks over her desk, with the glasses, and she's looking at me. She goes, we need to get into Kabul. And so I'm like, to do what, sir? I was to do what, ma'am? And she's like, to open our embassy. So it's like, how do you open an embassy? I had no idea, man. I'm an infantryman. She looks, she goes, you're a Marine colonel, figure it out. I mean, so I was like, holy shit, yes, ma'am, So I turned around, walked off, went to see the RSO. I said, this is what she just told me. He said, hey, she give you a blank check, use it. So, it's really interesting. I have no idea what I'm doing, right? But I can figure it out. And so I called on to Mattis's group, and so he gave me a provisional rifle company from an artillery battery. And we're all going to meet at Bagram. We just secured Bagram. Everybody's flying into Bagram, and then we're going to drive down to Kabul and open the embassy. Well, what I'd forgotten was that the State Department is going to send this group of civilians. They're facilities maintenance type people, right?
Hmm.
So a couple of days later, I get called, hey, you got to meet these civilians. They just arrived in Islamabad. So I go to the conference room, and these people are geriatrics. I mean, I hate to say that, but they're good people. Don't get me wrong, but they're all in their late 60s. Oh, I shouldn't say that shit. I'm there too. But 60s and 70s. And I'm thinking, I walk in the room, and in my mind, I'm thinking, holy shit. And so the first question I ask is, hey, does anybody have sleeping bags? No hands go up. Okay, so we're gonna need sleeping bags. So I sent somebody out in the market, go get me sleeping bags, warm jackets, and all this stuff. And so we took them, and we took a mobile security detachment from the DSS. These guys are gunfighters, right? I
Mhm.
mean, they're really good. So we land in Bagram, and in the middle of the night, and I take them in a blown out. And I kind of knew Bagram from before, so I take them in a blown out hangar, and we just spend the night there. Marines link up next morning with an SF ODA team, and then we're supposed to drive down to Kabul, and we'd rented some local buses. Now, typical Marine Corps. I love the Marine Corps, right? I love it. So the gunnery sergeant, the battery gunny, had all their Marines get fresh haircuts and shit. So as I'm walking by the buses to make sure our head count and shit is good, all I'm seeing is these white walls, right? Tanned kids with white wall heads, and I'm thinking, Jesus. So I told the staff and student officer, hey, put some blankets, some shit up on the windows. I don't want some idiot taking a pot shot at him. Then we got other problems. So he does, so they do that, and then we started going, then we head down towards Kabul. Now all the bridges have been blown, so there's a fording site along this creek. This is a really interesting story, and so we get to the fording site. There's a tank sitting at the fording site, old Russian tank. So we stop. I hop out. I used to always take cartons of cigarettes with me to, break bread. Cigarettes are awesome, but they're worth a lot of money, right? For us, there's nothing. Back then I think it was like $10 a carton or some shit. And I got a carton of cigarettes. Salam alaikum. And I asked the guy. I said, "Hey, can we cross here?" He goes, "Yeah, you can cross here." I said, "Great, we're gonna be cross." He goes, "But you got to pay me." I'm like, "Pay you for what?" He said, I'm guarding the site. You got to pay me." I said, "I'll give you cigarettes. I'm not paying you." She goes, "No, no, no. I need." So I said, "What? I'm not paying you." So we're arguing back and forth. I said, "I'll tell you what. I'll give you one magazine or two magazines." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm going to shoot one magazine out of my rifle because I have my rifle, or I'm going to shoot two. And as soon as I start shooting, all those people behind me are going to start shooting. You're going to die here. So you might as well let us cross." So he goes, "Give me something. I'm really poor." So I said, "What do you need?" And I'm looking up at this guy, and he goes, "Give me your boots." And I looked down about boots, and I kind of looked down at his feet. This is the dead of winter. This is like November 2001. This guy's got no boots on, nothing. It's freezing her ass off. And I look at him, I was like, you feel sorry for the dude, but I'm not giving you my boots. But I promise you, when I come back, I'll bring you some shoes. So we cross, we go to the embassy, secure the embassy, and I tell you, it just warmed my heart seeing the staff that we had, the local nationals. For 13 years, the place has been shut down. Uh, Everything was accounted for. When you walk through the Chancery building, plates with food left there as it was, knives and forks. And so we started going through the warehouses. All the Tabasco bottles are there, all the beers are there, and they kept, logbook entries. And the Marines go in there, they start rat fucking it, right? I mean, they're taking the Tabasco and all this shit, which is fine. I got no issue with it. And so while we're going through the warehouses, I find these old Korean War Parkers. You remember those Parkers with the big fur?
Mhm.
So I told the Marines, I said, grab those, give them to the snipers up on the roof, because it's cold up there. And then they come across a box of boots. In my mind, I'm thinking, shit, I owe that guy a boot. I said, throw him in the back of my vehicle. And so we secure that whole compound. And I basically said, hey, nobody's coming in or going out. But and then we put all the civilians in a bunker underneath with a couple of rooms and a bathroom. And this is the type of shit that really pisses me off, right? We're all Americans. Remember that. So one day I see a Marine squatting down in a binger ditch, right? And I'm like, why the hell are you not using the bathroom? He goes, sir, we're not allowed to use it. I'm like, well, what the hell are you talking about? He said, those civilians said we can't use it. It's only for State Department. And I'm freaking torqued. I said, bullshit. Follow me, right? I go down there, I rip that sign right off the bathroom door, and this freaking Poindexter tells me, I said, let me tell you something, we're all Americans, right? My Marines will use this toilet just like you will, and we don't segregate anybody around here. And if I see the sign up again, I'm gonna throw your ass out on the other side of the wall. You hear me? And that was it. I just laid the law down. And the Marines are like, hoorah, and obviously, I mean, not everybody can use it, but at least nobody's denying them, right?
Mhm.
And that's important. And then we had then the Northern Line showed up, right? And they're like, "You're not supposed to be here." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Evidently, there's an agreement that no foreign forces would come into Kabul,
Hmm.
right? And we're there. So I said, "Well, we're here. We're not leaving." So he said, "Well, I said, this is our embassy. It's not even Afghanistan. This is American property. We know." So back and forth. So he said, "Take your uniforms off then." I said, "I'm not taking my uniforms off. You got to kill me, and that ain't gonna happen either, right?" So he said, "Well, can you cover them up?" And this is the art of negotiating, right? You got to find middle ground. So it's a win-win. So I said, yeah, I can do that. So we had the Marines put on their black fleeces on
Mhm.
top of their utility uniforms.
The Tommy Franks
And
black fleeces.
you remember that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cameras, CNN cameras picked it up and they broadcasted Marines have landed in Kabul and, secured the embassy. And it goes on, world news and all that stuff. And I get a call all the way from Hawaii. Mar 4 pack, 3 stars. He finds out on that damn Iridium Inmarsat thing that I had, I'm Marine Corps new. They called me up and he's ripping my lips off. He's a good guy, but he didn't know the whole story. And he's like, "Who the hell do you think you are, changing Marine Corps uniform policy? Get those damn things off." Blah. He's just ripping my lips off. And before I could explain, he doesn't want to hear my side, right? He's just amped up. So finally, I said, "Sir, you coming in broken up?" Sir, click. I was like, "Fuck that." And the Marines kept doing what they're doing. Then all of a sudden, this one dude shows up and wants to come in. I don't know if you want to hear all this stuff or no.
Oh,
It's pretty interesting.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So this dude shows up and he wants to come in the compound, in the embassy compound, and the Marines won't let him in. But he's being a nuisance out there. So the Marines call me, "Hey, sir, some guys out here, some claims to be an American." Blah. So I walk out there and he goes, "Hey, can I talk to you down the fence line?" So I said, "This better be good because you waste my time." He goes, "Hey, I need to get in here." I said, "You can't get in here. It's closed off." So he goes, "But I work for the agency." So I said, "I'm an astronaut, man." I said, "How the hell am I supposed to know you work for the agency? I have no way. So I said, "Give me your name. I'll call back to Islamabad. If they verify it, I'll let you in." So he gives me his name. I call back to Islamabad. They verified him. He happens to be a guy by the name of Gary Bernstein, wrote the book Jawbreaker.
Ah.
He's a big deal. He's really a big deal. He's one of the first paramilitaries to get into Afghanistan from the north. And so these guys were in Kabul, right, working for the agency in a hotel, literally walking distance away from the embassy. And he comes in there and he's like, "Listen, here's the deal. President Karzai, they just had the Bonn conference in Germany, and they elected Karzai to be, the interim leader of Afghanistan. And he's coming in to Kabul or to Bagram tomorrow night, flying in. And you happen to have the senior U.S. diplomat." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" That facilities lady that we had, she was the undersecretary of, you know, janitors or whatever the hell it was. I have no idea, right?
Mhm.
But she's a senior U.S. diplomat under the law. So he said she's got to go receive him to make it look formal for picture opportunity. And all I'm thinking in my mind, shit. Okay, fine. So we go down and brief her. She's excited. This is her 15 minutes of fame. She's going to be on, national. And she's a nice lady. So we get the MSD detachment and everybody. We're going to tool back up to Bagram. And so we drive up to Bagram, the fording site. Same tank, same dude. He comes, he sees me, "Hey," he goes, "Did you bring me anything?" I said, "Check the back of the vehicle." So he opens up the box and he pulls out boots. I said, "Take the whole damn thing. They're old black boots." And so he's excited. He's hugging me. He's like, "You're a good man," and all this shit. So we get to Bagram and we put this lady in the Air Operations Center. It's basically a tent, right? Big tent, the wooden floor. And somebody built like a lounge chair out of wood. So I put her in there. I give her a poncho liner. I said, "Ma'am, I'll wake you up." So it's about 2000, 8 p.m. And I go to this young kid at the Tactical Air Control Center thing. And I was like, "What time's Karzai's plane coming?" He's like, 2200, sir. So I'm like, "Okay." So, you know, later on I go up to, "Hey, what time's Karzai's plane coming?" "Sir, it's coming at midnight." It got delayed. Okay. At 2200, I go check. "Hey, what time's Karzai's plane coming in?" And there's another kid there on watch. And he's like, "Sir, he's already come and gone." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yes, sir. He came and he's gone. The plane left." I'm like, "You got to be shitting me." So, I was taught bad news doesn't get better with time. So I go and, wake up this lady. She's in her, poncho liner asleep. And I'm like, "Ma'am, get up." I said, "I got some bad news for you." And she's like, "Is Karzai here?" I was like, "No, ma'am, we messed it up. He's come and gone." So she hops out of the lounge chair and starts jumping up and down like a bunny rabbit. "I want to see Karzai. I want to see Karzai." And I'm just standing there going, "What the F is going on?" Nobody taught me how to handle this case. And all of a sudden I hear from the back of the tent, "You shut the F up. We're trying to sleep." And literally, I had to bite my tongue because I just started laughing. I went out and anyway, so we really screwed it up. So
Mhm.
it happened right at this time when all these planes are coming in. They're starting to formalize Afghanistan, put structure, right, command and control. So they send their first general in there, a 1-star, very famous dude. I won't take any names. And he sees me. He goes, "Hey, are you Khan?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir, I am." And he's like, "Hey, there's going to be a plane leaving tonight. I want you on." I'm like, "Sir, I need to get CENTCOM's permission because I work for CENTCOM." And so I called back to CENTCOM. They said, "Yeah, go ahead. Get on the plane." And literally, I have no idea. So I go back to General. I've got no gear, right? Because I left all my shit in Kabul. I'm like, "Hey, sir, I hate to sound like a pussy, but I got no gear." So he
Mhm.
points to Lieutenant Colonel. He goes, "Hey, give him all your shit." So this poor guy's like, putting all this crap in a parachute bag, and I felt bad for him. I said, "I'll mail it to you, man." And eventually I did. And so I distinctly remember there's a pathway. Everything is lined up by chem lights, meant safe routes, right? Everything else is mined. So I remember with that parachute bag on my back, I make my way through this pathway, and there's it turned out to be an MC-130 was turning. I didn't know that. I couldn't see it in the dark, the boom and all that. So I hop in the back of this aircraft, buckle myself up. I have no idea. Nobody's told me what the hell's going on, right? I have no clue. I just get on the airplane, does my orders, I get on there. And all of a sudden the lights come on. And I kind of look around, everybody's in civilian clothes. I'm like, holy shit. And what happened was the crew chief just got tired of it, right? Trying to buckle everybody up in the dark. So he just turned on the lights, buckled everybody up, and we took off. 45 minutes, hour later, we land in the desert, and we all hop out, and we're just sitting there. And all of a sudden, I hear say, "Where's that Marine at?" So I'm thinking, great, we got, there's another Marine with us. No answer. Hey, there's a Marine that got on the aircraft. Where's he at? And it kind of dawns on me. They're talking about me. I go, it's it's me. So they go, hey, we got to link up with the Marines. I'm like, where the F are we? I have no idea. And it turns out we're Objective Rhino, Camp Rhino, which was Mattis's base in southern Afghanistan. And I knew about it because I helped the Marines get in there. So I said, okay, does anybody got a flashlight? Because I didn't have one. So they gave me a flashlight, and I said, you all stay here. I'll come back and get you because I can see a chem light in the distance. I figured I'd walk towards the chem light. I should be all right.
That
So I
sounds
started
really
walking
dangerous,
towards the chem.
brother.
Huh?
It sounds very dangerous, man.
Oh, well, I didn't, I mean, what else are you going to do? But I knew that somebody had seen the aircraft land,
Mhm.
right? I mean, so all these thoughts are cycling through my mind. And I'm walking towards the chem light, and I'm realizing, just like you said, sounds dangerous. That hey, shit, I may get shot here by some young Marine. So I turn on the flashlight to my face, and I started singing the Marine Corps hymn from the halls of Montezuma. And all of a sudden, I hear, "Oh, who goes there?" Lieutenant Colonel Khan, get down, MF. You know. So I'm spread eagled on the ground, and my ID card in my left breast pocket. I said, "Hey, my ID is right here." So I said, "Get your platoon sergeant out here." So platoon sergeant, I said, "Hey, go tell General Mattis that Colonel Khan's here." And so anyway, they get their permissions, and we go back, get that group. So we go to the COC building. It was like a concrete building, and I'm sort of, ass grabbing with my fellow Marine officers, right? Because I hadn't seen them. I mean, my buddies that I went through all the schools and shit with. These guys go off on a briefing. I screwed up. I should have gone on the briefing with them because I'm supposed to be their escort. And so what happens is they come out of the briefing, and next morning we're doing the helicopter-borne assault into Kandahar, and they're part of it. And this, I believe is a assault wave or the second wave maybe. And they reconfigured the sticks. I knew the battalion commander. He comes and talks to me. I was like, okay, Roger that. Sorry to whatever. I still have no idea what's going on because I didn't sit in the brief. So like about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, we launch and we land in Kandahar just at daylight. Small minor firefight, nothing at all. That up in the distance. And but I told civilians, I said, "Hey, stay on that tarmac. Don't go off the tarmac." And I believe that day a Marine stepped off and unfortunately lost his foot to a mine. And I linked up with another ODA in Kandahar, and so we loaded up with them, and we go to a place called Tarnik Farms, which is right next to the airport, which was Bin Laden's training ground.
Mhm.
And we cleaned through that. Now I'm starting to figure out what the hell's going on. These guys are sent by Rumsfeld, right? They're trying to find WMD. That's their mission, right? I have no clue. I don't even know what WMD looks like. I know what CS gas looks like. I mean, that's about the extent of my WMD experience, but I'm the Marine guy that I'm going with them. And so we go through Tarnic Farm, like, I mean, fine tooth comb. They're pulling off these sockets and swabbing them and all this shit, right? We go in Bin Laden's bunker. I found some porn and some negligee and all that shit there. And then we come across this. They come running out, and a couple of these guys, and they, with these rocks, these blue rocks, and and everybody's excited because they found something. And I go walking up there, and I'm like, "This is lapis lazuli, which is a semi-precious stone that that they make artifacts with. It's nothing. It's not WMD." And so I said, "Where'd you guys find these?" So it's like around an internal compound. There's like these trunks full of lapis lazuli. I mean, so I told the agency guy that we had with us, I said, "Why don't we just evacuate the shit, take it back to the U.S. and give it to the families of the World Trade Center?" I'm not sure if that happened or not. Probably not. So anyway, so we leave there, and as we're going back to the airport, there's these high-rise buildings, maybe 4 stories, and you can see them in Google pictures, uh, that they want to inspect. So I'm like, okay. So we pull in there, and we had EOD guys in front of us, and so they put on their so they go down the stairs, and as we're going down, I'm about halfway down the stairs, and all their Geiger counters go off. So these guys turn around and run. They really stampede over me. I mean, no, I'm knocked to the ground, and they go running out of the building. I'm like crawling up the stairs. I make my way to the top. Holy shit, what's going on? There's something down there, radiation. So some people are excited that we found something. So they put on this hazmat suits and they go back down there. And turns out that they found Russian aphids missiles. It's like an air-to-air missile with a depleted uranium core or some shit.
Mhm.
I know nothing about it. And so the EOD guys are like, "Hey, sir, we'll just collapse the buildings right here. We'll just blow them up, bury this shit." And I'm like, "We're not doing anything. Mark it. I'll report to General Mattis. This is his battle space. He'll have to deal with it. We're moving on." And that's exactly what we did. And that was the right answer. We don't want to go around blowing up shit. But the interesting thing was when we pulled up to Tarnic Farms, I looked out as I was stepping out of the Hummer. There's a mangled camera there, and I was like, "Shit!" And there's a little Afghan kid sitting there. I go, "What happened here?" He goes, "They're mines." It says some reporters came through and one of them got hurt. And that kind of, I was like, shit, we didn't think about mine. So we had to call back and get the EOD guys to come out to clear the Tarnic Farms as we went through it. So we had EOD with us. And so it was a pretty interesting story with the kids. I said, "Hey, is there pathways through this place?" He goes, "Yeah." So I said, "Can you show us?" She goes, "How much are you going to give me?" I said, I'll give you, $100, So he comes back, he wants to negotiate 500, right? I'm like, "I'm not getting, now I'm gonna give you 50. So you're losing time and all that shit."
Mhm.
So anyway, so they made it a little bit easier for us. And so we got back to the airport. And the interesting part, these are the small lessons. Link ups are always difficult and conditions change. When we left the airport, there's no security. Now the Marines are there, the whole place is secured, just like the Kabul embassy that I talked about. They wouldn't let us back in because the general's orders was nobody's coming in, right? So we're sitting outside, it's getting dark, and I'm like, "We got to come in," and they dropped all the trees to make the batises, all
Mhm.
that, thinking, Taliban's going to attack them. And I remember talking to, I asked to see the platoon commander. So he comes out. I said, "Listen, stud, I said, you got to let us in. I'm not sleeping out here. My name's Lieutenant Colonel Khan, blah, blah, blah." He'd heard of me. Anyway, so I said, "Talk to Mattis. He'll approve it." So they approve it. We go back in. And then next day we went and there's other targets that they had. One was a big, worn out, broken down cloth factory,
Mhm.
massive facility. So we go there. There's about 20, 30 guards out in front of it, and we need to go in there. These guys are saying, "We got to go in there, check it out." So and the guards are like, "You can't go in there." So I'm bantering with them back and forth. And finally, I got tired of it, and I was like, "You know what? I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. And if you're not going to let us in, we're going to start shooting."
Mhm.
Right. So all I want you to do is, put your weapons down, let us in, we're going to do our thing, and we'll leave. I mean, it's really that simple. You got 5 minutes starting now. And I walked away. So I go to the special forces, and their chief is like, what was that all about, sir? So I was like, 5 minutes, we start shooting. He's like, damn, sir, we brought you here not to get in a gunfight. I said, we'll see what happens. And I hear the guys talking. There's like, is he serious? Is he not serious? One guy says, hey, listen, I don't want to die for this shit. He puts his weapon down. They all do. We go in, we do our stuff. And they find a bunch of documents in the back room. They knew exactly where to go. It's pretty interesting. And they find a bunch of documents in the back of this room. And they wanted to take the documents. Now the guards are like, you can't take the documents. I said, we got to take them, man. I said, I'll give you a receipt for them, just so you have accountability. So anyway, we talked through that. We took the documents. Then we went to Mullah Omar's palace, right? Which the SF guys were already there.
Mhm.
And they wanted to check the tunnels. Now, all the tunnels that you saw on CNN were BS. I mean, the tunnels in the cave network in Afghanistan was very rudimentary. There's no cement, concrete, all that stuff that we saw.
The reporting at
This,
CNN was like, it's like the Maginot Line, right? Like that these tunnels were an obsession for media reporting. It's interesting you said that.
yeah. So I mean, absolutely not. They're just the caves that I saw were just freaking caves, man. I mean, it's just nothing. And this is my second tour. Also, the stuff that I saw was just caves. This thing was different.
Mhm.
This thing was actually finished off, concrete, and EOD's in front of me. We're going in, and there's this young kid behind me, civilian, and he goes, "Sir, you should be approaching a junction, and to the right is a toilet, you know, with the shower in, you know." So I was like, "Okay," and so EOD guy says, "Hey, sir, there's a junction here." So in my mind, I'm thinking, "Shit, take a right." That's what he said. So take a right. He goes, "Sir, so what's at the end of it?" A toilet. The shower, some. I turn around to the kid and I'm like, not a kid, he's a young man. I said, how the hell you know all this? He goes, sir, I've been studying this tunnel network for the last 7 years. And, the light bulb's starting to come on. These guys belong to some organization that I had no idea about, right?
Mhm.
So, and it's pretty interesting. So we get done with that and then we go to some flower factory. The bottom line is we didn't find shit, right?
Mhm.
There's nothing there. There's no WMD and all this stuff. And so I started making my way back to Pakistan, right? My job is done with these guys. And so as I'm going back to Camp Rhino to get my ride back to Islamabad, I got asked to sit through a brief, right? And the brief was primarily about a WMD signal that we're getting from this one location in Helmand. And they're going to send the Force Recon guys down there, you know. And the MU commander asked me, Genghis, you want to go with them? Because of my language skills. And I said, shit, yeah, I'll do it. So we hop in some helicopters, do a morning raid, and we're supposed to extract an SAS team out. This is really interesting. So, typical, I've got this carton of cigarettes that I'm walking towards this village, towards this old man. And all of a sudden, I'm probably about 3-4 steps away from this bush, and the bush just jumps up. Scared the crap out of me, right? Because I didn't have time to react. I mean, the guy's brilliant. He goes, hey, chap, are you the Marines? I go, I am. He goes, we're supposed to link up with you. I said, go that way. And I just kept my bearing because he scared the crap out of me. And I just kept walking towards the old man. I told him, hey, we got to come in this village. He goes, you don't need to come here. I said, yeah, we do. I gave him some cigarettes. I said, listen, I know you have something in this village because I knew you took a piss underneath that tree this morning. I'm just making this shit up. And because we can see everything. So just let us come in, we'll inspect, and we'll be on our way. So we go in the village, and Geiger counters are going off. So we're breaking down, digging everywhere and all that. We can't find nothing, right? And just blew my mind. I mean, there's nothing there, but the Geiger counters are going off. Come to find out later on, when we extracted, that whole area was an old uranium
Wow.
mine the Russians had used, right? And so they'd use the dirt to build their homes, and that's why the air breathers are picking up the radiation. I mean, this is the type of shit but we basically pissed off this entire village by going in there and just, harassing them type thing. It wasn't cool at all. So we get done with that, and so then I go back to Pakistan, and if you remember back in that story that all these people are coming across the border, so the Pakistanis are like tired of feeding
Mhm.
several hundred Arabs on our behalf, and they want these people gone. So we had this big meeting and stuff, what to do with these people, and I had served in Gitmo prior to that, right, when the Operation Sea Signal. And as a thought, I just threw it out there. I said, why don't we just send them to Gitmo? Everybody's like, what are you talking about? I said, we already have camps there for migrants. Send these people there. So they looked at it. That's a plan that they came up with. And so basically, then we have to figure out a way to move these people out. Now they're all up north in Peshawar, small, not fairly. It's a military town, Peshawar, next to the Afghan border. So we come up with a plan that we're going to fly in aircraft at night, load them up, and take them out. Right? Simple plan, works, right? Because that way nobody can see American aircraft coming in. So the first night we land our airplane, and I'm thinking, hey, CENTCOM's got a handle on this. RCENT's got a handle on this shit. So they sent some special MP unit that deals in, you know, POW handling and all this stuff. These guys come out of the aircraft, they look like robots. They got NVGs on, they're all carrying rifles, and the first guy they bring out, um, he's hyperventilating, this first guy, because he doesn't know. He's hooded, they're yelling at him, kneel. He doesn't react. Kneel. They're yelling at him louder, so he's getting more amped up. And then they go through their sequence. They've got a checklist. Check right breast pocket. And then the guy says, check right breast pocket. He affirms it. Check left breast pocket. All this down this list. And it's taken 15, 20 minutes to process all of these guys. I'm thinking in my mind, hey, shit, the sun's going to come up. This ain't working. Right? So as I'm saying this, one of the guys breaks out of his flex cuffs because he's hyperventilating, right? He just breaks out of his flex cuffs. He's a big dude. And my, high school football reaction. So I just took a running start and boom, slam into him. Both of us get knocked to the ground. People pile on. I hear weapons coming off safe. Luckily, I'd taken an embassy Marine with me. And this young man, the corporal, grabbed me by my boots and pulled me out of this pileup. And now I'm pissed. I'm like, you know what? Stop this freaking madness. I said, just pat him down and get him on the freaking aircraft and get him out of here. I'm done with this shit. And so the Pakistanis are like, well, we need our handcuffs back. They had like shackles on the legs and their handcuffs, right? I said, listen, I'll get them back to you. Don't worry about it. Let's just let me have them because I'm tired of swapping them out for flex cuffs and all this happy horse shit. So the Pakistanis agree. We load them off, and I ordered some handcuffs for them. So next day, like, back then, I mean, you wish something and Santa Claus comes and drops it off, right? So we got a pallet of handcuffs. I have no idea how many. There were big freaking cardboard box of handcuffs showed up. Again, the Pakistanis, they're counting them out because they want to take the ones that, 40 that they took. I was like, take the whole damn thing, let's move on. It's for the future ones. And so we started that process, right? To expedite it, to get these people. And we took several hundred of them out there from there to back, and they ended up in Gitmo, and I believe there's still 30 of them. I think if my numbers are correct, there's like 756 were taken back there. And out of there's still about 20 left. Wow. I think one guy we waterboarded like 83 times and he finally said, yeah, I did it. Shit. I'll tell you what, I don't know if you've been waterboarded. I have. Once is enough for me. I don't need to do it 83 times. So anyway, so that's a mess on itself, right? And I can't really talk to it because I don't know about the legal ramifications of all this shit. So that was it. And then we came back and, and so while all this is going on, there's all the, there's a lot of interrogations going on that I was participating in and different things because the focus really was bin Laden, right? I mean, that was the focus. That's what we're trying to do. And we're farming out a lot of money and stuff and all that stuff. And people would walk up to the embassy and say, hey, I think I have some information. And most of them were full of shit. They know because they're going to get money, $300-400, So that's the gist of it, the first part.
Genghis, thank you. That is one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard. So many things that you did that just the average person who was either at home or was on the ground at the time or just veterans of the comp just didn't know about. And the thing that, like, not to be cliche, but the thing that comes to mind when you're talking about this is message to Garcia, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about like the type of leadership in a situation like that where there's no playbook, I mean, what are the key leadership traits of someone? What advice would you have for some officer who would find himself in a similar situation in a future campaign? Like, what kind of traits, professional traits, are you looking for someone who's charged with that responsibility?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is really trust, right? You got to trust everybody, all the stakeholders. It may also be, The other side, it may be this ally that we don't know if they're ally or not our ally, and you got to develop this trust within the team, right? And that's the first part. And the second part is you have to be able to get their input and make decisions rapidly. So
Mhm.
I did a podcast a couple of weeks ago talking about the OODA loop, right?
Yep.
OODA loop's very, very important, right? Observation, orientation, decision, action, right? And the idea is you don't want a big OODA loop that takes weeks, right? You don't want this big cycle. You want this short cycle where you're operating much quicker than anybody else, you know. And in many cases, when I was a battalion commander, my OODA loop was faster than the Muse. And, so in this case, my first tour in Afghanistan, my decision making cycle based on trust. And I'll give you an example. When I needed an aircraft to go to, the bases in the south that I talked about, it would take a 1 day request, right? ATO cycle. You have to send the request in 24 hours later, they send you the aircraft. Well, some days you don't have that you don't have that luxury of 24 hours. So I'd pick up the phone and call my Pakistani counterparts, you know, and they would ask me, sir, when do you want to go wheels up? Right?
Mhm.
And my response was, how quickly can you do it? And their response was, how quickly can you get to the airport?
Right.
Half hour, 45 minutes, right? And that the reason they did it was because of trust, right? They trusted each other. And you just have to understand the operating environment. Now, you take somebody like me, put me in Korea, I'm no good. I can still make relationships and I understand how that works. But because of my language skill and my background and knowledge and all that stuff, firsthand knowledge, it was effective. And I was able to do multiple things, right? And not many people can do that. Now you got to remember, first tour in Afghanistan, it was just a group of us, special forces, CIA paramilitary, and some other people that are just working together. And I'd say in total, maybe less than 1,000 people literally took apart Afghanistan, right? And then all of a sudden, once we took it apart, then the big CENTCOM back home decided, hey, we need command and control, we need this, we need that, and well, all this shit started showing up, and then all of a sudden it becomes self-serving, and we can go into that. What are some of the mistakes we made? And so you need to find the right people, the Garcias, that can get things done. And there's a few and far between, but it's got to be the right Garcia. You just can't take some schmuck that knows nothing about South Asia and Middle East and put them in there and expect results to happen. So it's important for the senior leaders to recognize that who are our key people in certain regions, and then use them, and then trust them. And so trust is not only within the team that you're working in, but your higher ups got to trust. And I'll tell you what, General DeLong trusted me implicitly. I love that man, right? Although he fired me once, and he would call me every day, and we talk, sometimes for 5 minutes, real quick. Hey, give me a quick update, ground truth. And he trusted me. And if I ever needed anything, short of dropping a nuclear weapon, I had pretty much, could do anything I wanted in terms of, as long as it made sense, is for the better good of the team, And if the ambassador needed help, yeah, I can help you. If they want me to go interrogate somebody, yeah, I can help you. It was team effort. And I think it's very important. And people pretty soon figure out that you're a team player, and then they start relying upon you.
Mhm.
I'll give you another example, and I believe, that Heather Mercer and Diane Curry, and it was they're the initial prisoners, and these girls were missionaries, right? I don't know what the hell somebody's doing going to Afghanistan to preach Christianity. I mean, that makes no sense, especially in the Taliban days, right? Uh, so anyway, so they're there and they get wrapped up in this stuff, and I believe there's like seven of them, seven Westerners, Germans, Americans, and there's like 14 Afghans that got wrapped up and they got thrown in prison, right? And so one day somebody says, "Hey, we're having a meeting in the bubble to rescue these prisoners. Can you be there?" So I'm like, "Okay." So I'm sitting in the cheap seats in the back, and you got all these high speed people. I mean, you can figure out who they are. They're talking about doing a direct action, raid into the Kabul prison to rescue these people, and I'm sitting there thinking, "You got to be shitting me. We're just going to make from one mess make a bigger mess,
Mhm.
right? It makes no sense." And at the end, when they went around the horn asking, I said, your plan makes no sense. You're going to get people killed, and we're going to have a bigger mess, and we're going to have to send more people to rescue the ones. So this colonel goes, so what are you proposing? So I said, and literally, I said, throw money at it. He's like, what do you mean? I said, we've got a network. Just tell them that we'll pay a ransom, man. It's really that simple. I mean, throw money at it. It'd be a hell of a lot cheaper. And so we went talk to the ambassador and the other people that are involved in these decisions, and that's exactly what we did. We threw
Mhm.
money at it. and they were rescued by anti-Taliban forces. I mean, uh, and then brought to a location that our helicopters went and picked them up, and then they were brought to Islamabad. So the pictures and stuff you see, but we needed a story at that time, and that picture you see in the media is the one I took, right? And the ambassador released it. I had no idea. I should have copyrighted it, made some money on it or some shit. I don't know. I'm joking, right? So, and the reason is because we needed a story. We needed, the team has done something. So it came down from the National Security Council, that, these hostages have been rescued. The reality is, yeah, were they rescued in the big scheme of things? Perhaps, but we just we bought them back. And sometimes it's easier just to use money in many cases. And I got pretty good at it, even in my second tour, that money talks. And everybody needs money and they're willing to do things for money. And in many cases, if we had used money at checkpoint 231 and used our Afghan militia for $5 a day rather than leaving an LAR platoon there by itself, isolated, Corporal Payne may be around, and the shit like that still bothers me because we all think in these Napoleonic ways,
Yep.
this is the way we got to act. And you don't. You just got to think and say, hey, what does the operating environment need?
Hmm.
What resources do they need? How can I how can I fund them those resources? Maybe money, maybe other type of equipment and stuff. Wells, like we talked about. So you got to be really quick on your feet. But if you're not willing to go in and mingle with the locals and understand them, you're not going to learn all this stuff. And I had no problem sit down with anybody and eating drinking chai. I mean, I've sat down with the Taliban, just to learn their side of the story. So I think that's very important, right? Know
Hmm.
your enemy, right? I mean, Sun Tzu talked about that. So we got to practice it.
Genghis, I think that, and this will be my final question before we move on to the next segment.
Sure.
I think a lot of folks within the military have this idea or this thing about foreign area officers or guys and gals who go to embassies and are T-sippers and help with acquisitions, and those things are extremely important. But what you're describing is something very different. You're setting the theater for a major military campaign, and that requires not just diplomatic skills, but it requires operational expertise. It requires just a whole suite of skills. I mean, I do you have any recommendations about how the military moving forward should train and educate foreign area officers, the type of officers we should select for those roles?
I'll be honest with you. We shouldn't even have the foreign air officer program. I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Mhm.
Okay. And the reason being is every officer and staff and CO, above the rank of E7 should be a foreign area officer, right? And how do you cultivate that? I've been a huge proponent that if you want to get promoted to the rank of major, okay, you better have a language skill. I mean, a bona fide language skill. None of this shit that, I know how to order a taco at Taco Bell, right? You got to have a language skill. Every general officer should have a language skill, right? And if we have that, what does a language skill develop? It develops a cultural eye inside your head that you can start seeing things that you normally wouldn't realize, right? But until we get serious about it and start demanding that our senior staff and COs and our officers must have a language skill rather than be joint designated staff officer. I think a language skill is more important. We're not going to succeed. We're a global. I mean, you got to remember, we got 800 bases around the world, but we got officers that can't go off the base and order a cab. Think about that. So let's identify the critical languages that we need. We definitely need to know Arabic, Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, and Hindi, Urdu. 6 languages just sitting here between you and me. In the last 10 seconds, we figured it out, right?
Yep.
And let's start sending out there. I'll give you an example. This has happened several years ago. I was talking to some general officers, and we're talking about, the future threats that the United States faces. Very easy, right? We all know Russia is an adversary. We know China is an adversary. We know Iran is an adversary. Okay, so in this discussion, I asked those generals, I said, name me, 5 cities in each one of those countries. Answer should be 15, right?
Right.
Guess what the highest was? 9, right? Guess what the average was? 7. I mean, these are our strategic decision makers. They couldn't name 5 cities in each of those countries. Yeah, they knew, Moscow, Beijing, Tehran. What about the rest of them? Right?
Mhm.
So until we really start focusing on that and cultivate these officers, I'm also a huge proponent. Now, check this crazy idea of forming an American Legion, not the veterans organization that everybody goes and sits there at the bar and drinks cheap beer, but a no shit American Foreign Legion along the lines of a French Foreign Legion, right? And there'd be millions of people, millions, I shit you not, that would come and join the American Legion. And you know what the ticket is? Yeah, you come join us, and at the end of 20 years service, we'll give you an American citizenship. Think about that. Think about the people we recruit from all over this planet that have the bona fide skills that we can base overseas. You know, we don't have to worry about these rotations, and we just have to train equipment and take care of them. And I'll tell you what, you don't even have to pay them at the same pay grade that we pay our regular forces. So this is the type of thinking we need to think in terms of unconventionally, right? But we don't. So what we do is we spend millions of dollars, you know, on training these special forces to be these American Legion type forces when we can do it for a fraction of the cost. But we need that type of thinking, and until we do that, it ain't gonna happen. So you know, so failure the program, I support it 100%. I think we need it, and I think it's not just going in the embassy in the DAT's office, you know, defense attaché's office, and sipping chai and stuff. Is getting out there and doing things and living within the community. I think that is so important, and building the relationships, building the trust, and understanding the operating environment. And until we do that, it's just a waste of time, quite frankly. If you're just going to assign people to go sit in a chancery behind Marine guards, what the hell are they learning? You might as well just zoom it like you and I are doing right now.
Uh,
You know,
Genghis, that is a really interesting set of ideas, and as I think about it, like how we operationalize that. Here's an example. So language skills should be taught to our children at a very early age.
yes, 100%.
When I was in high school, we took like 1 year of Spanish to tick the box saying like he can graduate high school. That's just not going to get it done. And
Yeah.
here's one. If you receive an ROTC scholarship, you receive an appointment to one of our service academies as an officer. You know, you take, at least when I was there, we took 1 year of language training, 2 semesters, right? Like that's not going to get it done. Maybe make that a commissioning requirement. You have to demonstrate
Yes.
proficiency in a
Yes.
language. You target those people at a younger age when they're more capable of learning a language. Um, and on the NCO side, as we in the Army, we have like, you know, NCO institutional schools, right? Maybe we make that a graduation requirement. You have to demonstrate, you have to select a language that accomplishes the service's objectives, and you have to actually demonstrate proficiency as an actual graduation requirement. And you're responsible, like your PT test, to validate your language skills. I think that's a fantastic idea. One that the current administration should seriously check out as we're doing reforms for the force.
It needs to be not only just for commissioning, but for promotion. You're not getting promoted to the next pay grade until you keep improving your proficiency.
Mhm.
It has to be 100%. I think it's more important. You know, yeah, we have, and trust me, I'm one of the biggest proponents of physical fitness, right?
Sure.
You know, and mental toughness. I believe in that stuff because that's the foundation. But you also have to have this, right? And it's not only just reading Napoleon's campaigns, you know, but being able to speak French. Now, when I was going through high school, I'm a little bit older than you are.
Mhm.
Latin was a language, right? The only Latin I know is Semper Fidelis. I don't know any other words in Latin. E pluribus unum. I know that one, right? So I know, you know, 5 words in Latin. But what a worthless freaking language teaching my generation, right? What they should have done is you got to project out 20 years from now and say, okay, what are the languages that we need to know? Mandarin, Cantonese, Hindi, you know, Arabic, Russian. These are languages we need our children to know. So I tell everybody that I know, and they got kids, teach them Mandarin, teach them Cantonese, because they're going to be viable in the future 20 years from now. Don't teach them Latin. That's a language of the past. And, you know, I mean, don't take it the wrong way. You know, remember we used to be taught German in high school.
Mhm.
Shit. I mean, Ubermaster or whatever, you know, I mean, it was stupid, you know.
Yeah.
Spanish is a good working language because, you know, a lot of people speak Spanish. So, I mean,
French is a good
those
one.
are things. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry. French is a good one also. Spoken widely in many continents.
Yeah, and I know French also, French fries, you know? I mean, I know that pretty well. I can speak it.
Now we're gonna fast forward over 20 years. And I don't know where you were in the world. I was here in DC watching the television, watching the events unfold. Uh, what were your emotions as you saw the events unfold in Kabul during the withdrawal?
I mean, I was pissed off. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm an amped up guy as it is. What I call as a high testosterone guy, and I'll get into that also, right? And the reason being is because we sacrificed so many lives, and all I kept thinking was Corporal Payne for what? Why? Right? And there's thousands of Corporal Paynes out there, and let alone the Afghan civilians. It didn't need to happen, right? And then we haven't learned the lessons from Vietnam. My Bible, my military Bible, is a book called About Face, David Hackworth. That's what I was brought up as a lieutenant. And guess what? As a lieutenant colonel, general, we made the same damn mistakes that he talked about. We never learned the lessons from Vietnam. So my question is, what's going to happen 20, 30 years from now? And can we afford another debacle? We can't. So I was angry, I was sickened, and I was embarrassed. And I felt for the families, especially the 13 Marines, soldier, and sailor that we lost. It shouldn't have had to happen. The commander's primary responsibility, number one, is to protect the force. If you don't protect your force, you can't accomplish the mission. And we failed in that responsibility, right? So that it really pissed me off. It was a poorly planned operation, and I'll tell you why. And it's poorly negotiated, right? And the poorly planned in the sense we made some flawed assumptions. You always plan against the enemy's most dangerous course of action, right? Right? And then you work your way backwards to the most likely. We failed to do that. We just assumed, hey, one of the most densely populated cities in the world, Kabul, has got an airfield right in the middle of it, that we're going to be able to get everybody out of there, rather than picking some points, along throughout Afghanistan, Herat, Kandahar, and we'll talk about Bagram separately, or even a ground evacuation, right? Buses like I use from Bagram to get to Kabul, use buses from Kabul to get to Torkham Pass in Pakistan, which is roughly about 4 hours away. You can load up buses and send them to Pakistan, and at the other end of them, process them in Peshawar Airport, same airport, and fly them out of there. But these idiots didn't think about it. These guys that we've spent millions of dollars educating, they got a 1,000-pound brain, and they weren't thinking about it. You know why? Because of hubris. Because they think they can do no wrong. And you got some illiterate guy at the other end riding the motorcycles out thinking them. I mean, think about that. It makes no sense, right? And, let's talk about Bagram. I'm not talking about, we should have never given Bagram. We should have negotiated when we negotiated with the Taliban, with the Afghan government also, that we're going to have a long-term lease for Bagram, just like we did after the Spanish-American War for Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. We have a long-term lease for that. We give the Cuban government money every year. Oh, by the way, they don't cash our checks, so we're getting it for free, right? We should have done the same thing. It should have been legalized with the Afghan government. And when Kabul fell, we should have said, hey, we got a contract here. We're not giving this up. We don't give a shit what you say. That's the first part. But since we didn't do that, if you read Mackenzie's book, Melting Pot, in it, he talks about that he was ordered by the chairman and the Secretary of Defense to fly to Qatar to help negotiate with the Taliban. Now think about that, right? He had to be ordered to go forward to Qatar to go sit in the negotiations, right? With Khalid Zalmai, right? And so now think about this, okay? How screwed up this is, right? So he goes there and he's negotiating with them. First of all, he's jet lagged, right? I guarantee he's jet lagged. I do that route quite often, right? So he's jet lagged. So that's the first problem. Second problem is the Taliban keeps a dossier on him, just like we keep a dossier on the Taliban. And then the dossier, the first page they open, guess what they say? Chugwarai, plump lamb. That was his call sign that they used. The Afghans did. And we're sending a plump lamb to negotiate with. They have zero respect for this guy because he's not a warrior. He's not a fighter, right? He's a plump lamb. That's the way they look at it. Like it or not. I'm not, demeaning anybody here, but I'm just telling you the truth, the way I see it, right? So that's happening, okay? In my opinion, wrong guy to send over there. You want to send somebody over there that they respect for his courage, for his warfighting abilities, and, and they're willing to negotiate with him. So Mackenzie goes over there with Zalmai, and Zal and these guys say, the Taliban basically, yeah, you guys got to stay out of Kabul. They say, well, we're already in Kabul. I'm paraphrasing here. Okay, we're already in Kabul. So the Taliban offer us, hey, Americans, take over security for Kabul. Mackenzie goes, oh, that's not my charter, right? So then Taliban says, "Now what?" So he says, "Do you have any problem with us taking over security for Kabul?" And Mackenzie says, "No, I don't have any problem with that because my job is to just get people." Now think about it; they're laying a trap for him, right? And then Mullah Badr looks to his counterparts and says, "Did he just say that it's okay for us to go to Kabul?" And they go, "Yeah, that's what we heard." So they just unleashed their mob, right? They're supposed to be a circle about 30 kilometers outside of Kabul. They're supposed to stay. So they just said, "Hey," told their troops to go in. They're already in there, right? They've already infiltrated. So
Okay.
they come out of the woodwork. Now they become our protector. Think about this shit. They're giving us force protection. Does that make any sense? I mean, a Lance Corporal could have figured this shit out. That something, this ain't working right. So they became our outer perimeter. So now we become their prisoners, right? So all this stuff makes no sense to me. We should have negotiated a safe passage like I talked about. We should have told them, hey, if I was in Qatar that day on August 16th, I would have said, I need Bagram. On 15th August, the Taliban took over Bagram. I said, hey, give it back to us.
Wow.
Then I wouldn't have never left, and now Trump is trying to get it back. I mean, the stuff makes no sense to me. This is not how you plan, right? And then what happens is instead of Mackenzie going forward, since the Taliban are already in there and he's just cut a deal, guess what? He goes back to Tampa. And there's a great, Congressman Corey Mills in a congressional hearing asked him point blank, where were you on August 26th when the suicide bombing attack happened? And Mackenzie clicks on the microphone to unmute it. It says Tampa. Think about that. Everything's going to shit. And what does he do? He distances himself from the problems, right? Because he wants plausible deniability. Oh, I wasn't there, And that's the type of stuff he's done before. When I was in combat with him, that's the same shit. He'd fly in for a couple hours, and then get the hell out of there because he didn't want all those Afghan militias doing a war crime or some shit. So left me exposed, responsible for anything that happened, right? Because he didn't want to be any near that turd. So this is the type of thinking we got. We need warriors that are willing to get out in the front,
Yeah.
And there were some general officers there in Kabul. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
did they have the authority? No. The rules of engagement. From Sergeant Andrew Vargas. Tyler Andrew Vargas. He talks about and I'll take his word for it. He's the guy on the ground that he had the suicide bomber in his sights, but wasn't given authorization by the battalion commander to take him out. But yet Mackenzie can use a drone strike and take out 10 innocent Afghans. 7 of them were children. He can do that, but a sergeant can't do what the sergeant wants to do. So this stuff makes no sense to me, let alone that we spent 20 freaking years in that country spending, over $3 trillion. What happened to that money? We left behind $80 billion in infrastructure and military equipment. Think about it. I know for a fact that when we handed off Leatherneck, right, all those land cruisers, those generators, high value items were sucked up by senior Afghan officials for their own personal use or to sell in the open market. You can go to Pakistan. Come with me next week. I'll take you to Pakistan. You can go buy all this shit in the border markets, in Pakistan. It's up for sale. All the American equipment. They're selling the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Right? That's how it ended up. And it's shameful. It's pathetic. My son fought in Afghanistan. I fought in Afghanistan. My Marines fought in Afghanistan. And we got screwed over, in my opinion. And we didn't get screwed over by the enemy because we kicked their ass any time. We got screwed over by our own leadership. That's the problem. And that's why we have so many mental issues when these people come back and they're like, I got lied to. Is this what I just sacrificed my life for? There's a moral dimension to war that we don't talk about. And if you don't get the moral dimension right, you'll always be on the losing side. And unfortunately, we never got it right. So that, it's a long answer, but that's how I feel.
It's a great answer. One of the things that I always admire about you in all of your work on Sentinel is that you don't hit the easy button and just blame Biden and blame Trump. Like you actually talk about military execution of that particular thing. However, and I don't want to take you down a partisan role, but from taking a step back, what were the mistakes that both the Trump and Biden administration made at the political level in the negotiations with the Taliban? Because I don't think a lot of people understand, like, those negotiations started long before the withdrawal, right? There was a series of political conditions that were set leading up to that moment. Could you point to a couple of mistakes at the political level that might have been made that we can learn from moving forward?
Sure. I mean, so this happened about 18 months prior, right? In February of 2020, right?
Mhm.
When President Trump started negotiating with the Taliban, right? And he sent Michael Pompeo, another
Pompeo.
bloated cow, to. I mean, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm not. Hey, fat is fat. That's the way I look at it. Okay, so he goes over there, all the hubris and all this stuff, negotiate with Taliban, and they look at him and he's like, you know what? Instead of a plump lamb, here's a plump cow, in my opinion. But here's the issue, right? That the fundamental mistake we made was that we excluded the Afghan government out of the negotiations. And I know why we did that, because it's just easier to come to a conclusion without them, right? But the idea was the U.S. forces were going to withdraw out of Afghanistan. The Taliban and the Afghan forces were going to achieve a peace agreement. That was underpinning everything, and it never happened. We just forgot about it in the transition between the two administrations. It never happened. So that's the first part, right? And then we negotiated this agreement in a vacuum. Now, there's something to be said about that, because for all intents and purposes, majority of the Afghan government at that time was corrupt,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we know this, right? Cigar reports and everything, people just making money hands down. And in my opinion, I'll tell you something. Nobody's ever talked about this, and I'll tell you something. Okay, I think that the Afghan government and the Taliban were in cahoots.
Oh, interesting.
Right, right. And let me explain, right? The reason being is the first president of Afghanistan was who? Hamid Karzai,
Mhm.
right? Who's the second president? Ashraf Ghani, right? They're both Pashtuns, right? So they, in my opinion, I can't verify, but just my analysis, that they're in cahoots with the Taliban. And the reason being is they said, we'll just keep this conflict going for as long as we can, because as long as this conflict keeps going, the ATM machine is going to be spitting out dollars,
Mhm.
right? And we're all going to get rich off of it, which they all did, right? And I mentioned in previous podcasts that we established all these, Afghanistan needed energy, so we put these generator sets all over Afghanistan, which needed fuel, which made us dependent on the roads to bring in fuel from Pakistan. And the Taliban started attacking the trucks. Then we told the security companies, "Hey, guard the trucks." Security companies knew they couldn't guard it any better than the military. So they got in a side deal with the Taliban, said, "Hey, let our trucks pass through. If every truck you pass through, we'll give you money." So the Taliban's making money off that, right? So everybody's making money. So all this stuff goes on for 20 years because you got this war going on, and the government is, sort of, working in tandem with the Taliban, keep this conflict going because the Americans will keep giving us dollars. And Trump, wises up to this. Now, trust me, I'm not a, Trump fan or a Biden fan. I'm apolitical. I'm an American, right?
Mhm.
So, all this, so Trump figures this out, that this is an endless pit, and says, we're out of there, right? That was the first good call, right, that he made. But the way he went about it was negotiating with them was flawed. We just made too many assumptions that the second administration didn't follow up with, and that's where we got caught with our shorts down. Now, we talked about that they should have negotiated a long-term lease for Bagram. We talked about that, right? That should have been in there. But then let's look at the CENTCOM option. CENTCOM had 18 months to plan this mission out. 18 months, right? So the first option that they gave them was maintain 2,500 U.S. forces with special operations and retain 8 bases, including Bagram. That was the first course of action, right? The second was reduce to 1,800 forces, hold 3 bases, include Bagram. That's the second one. The third one is complete military withdrawal, maintaining embassy presence. That's the third course of action, right? Now, remember what you and I were taught in planning. Never give commander a bad course of action, because the danger is he may pick it. The fourth course of action is that they gave to Biden, and I'm taking this right out of McKenzie's book,
Mhm.
okay? Complete pullout with no diplomatic presence. Holy shit. Which one is Biden going to pick? Complete pullout with no diplomatic presence. That's what the agreement with the Taliban was. The U.S. is pulling out, and that's the one he picked.
Yeah.
These are the course of actions our military gave our political leaders, And let me tell you something. I'm a big believer in the Constitution. You know this, right? I 100%. I embrace the Constitution. I don't just selectively say Second Amendment. I'm a Fifth Amendment guy. I'm a Fourth Amendment guy. I'm all of it, right? Okay. In the Constitution, civilians have control of the military. I fundamentally believe that. Okay. But the Constitution doesn't tell politicians to meddle in the military either. And what do I mean by that? Right. So if you harken back to history and look at, the Korean War and the Vietnam War, when the White House started meddling in military operations. The politicians did. And since then, we really haven't won a war, right? Absent Desert Storm. And we can talk about that on the side, right? So the deal as part of the Constitution is, yeah, you got civilian control, but don't meddle in the military affairs. That means, the White House, the National Security Council, Congress, and DOD civilian personnel shouldn't be meddling in military affairs. That's what you got generals for. And the generals got to stand up and say that. There's a great Indian general, field marshal, that was called in by Indira Gandhi because she thought there's going to be a coup. Sam McIntosh. And he went to see her, and she's sitting there, all depressed. And she said, "I'm hearing that you're going to take me out." He said, "Madam," he said, "as long as you don't meddle in military affairs, I won't meddle in politics." And it's an ultimatum. He set up a barrier. Like, hey, here's the boundary. You stay on your side, I'll stay on my side. But the problem is the military's allowed these politicians, these Poindexters, to come in with suits on and start making decisions. And then what do the generals do? They just start pointing fingers. Hey, this administration made us do it. That administration made us do it. This undersecretary made us do it. That undersecretary. But here's the deal. Read some history. And I know you have. And you know this because one of the greatest generals we had was General Eisenhower. General Eisenhower on D-Day wrote a note. And you can find this on Google. He wrote a note that he accepts full responsibility for the failure of D-Day landings. Right? He pre-wrote it in case something happened. Right? He didn't blame FDR. He didn't blame Churchill. He didn't blame the politicians. He accepted responsibility. Nimitz did the same in the Pacific War when he committed all his carriers, the Battle of Midway Island.
Yeah.
What happened to these people? Why don't we have generals, honorable people like that willing to take a responsibility? When I do something wrong, I take responsibility. I don't hide behind my rank. I don't hide behind my command. I don't hide behind my Marines. I accept responsibility like a man. That's what men do. But low testosterone men, and I'll tell you this much, scientifically proven. When you have low testosterone, you do shit like this. And I'm a big advocate. I did an episode on it. People thought I was crazy. But I'm telling you, there's something method to my madness, and there's some science behind this. As you age, as you go up after the age of 50, your testosterone drops. And what does that do? It affects your mental clarity. It affects your energy. It affects your thinking. And it affects your ability to lead. So what I would say, in addition to the language courses that we talked about, that every officer beyond the rank of colonel should be given a testosterone test. And that doesn't mean they have to go on TRT. I mean, there's natural ways of boosting your testosterone, but at least they know they have a problem. But if the military is not willing to give out these testosterone tests, then nobody knows we have a problem. And you look at these guys, go to the picture of, Secretary of War sitting there, and you got all these generals just sitting there like this, and I'm looking at this picture, shit, I wouldn't follow these clowns to Taco Bell. But you want me to follow you to combat, rev it up. Go get a test, hit the weight room, hit the gym, boost up your testosterone so the young Marines will follow you like lions. That's my point.
Yeah. Genghis, for those who don't know, I'm going to put actually drop the link into that because, that's a very unconventional kind of idea. And I think that's one of the objectives of this project is to actually give voice to people who present fresh, new ideas. So I think everyone should check it out. I do want to talk to you a little bit about historically. If you mentioned about like the whole, like, let's blame the politicians thing. And it's a little bit of a sensitive issue for me because if you take a look at history, that kind of thinking always leads to bad outcomes. You saw it in the Weimar Republic in Germany, right? Where people were blaming, the trope was, the politicians were the reason we lost World War I, right? And then you saw it also in the wake of Vietnam. It's pointing up at the politicians. You were passionate about accountability, particularly for senior officers. And I often, my personal reaction to anytime I hear about people in the military blaming the politicians, I usually discredit it pretty quickly because you're given as a senior officer, you're given so much discretion in execution to make sure that bad things don't happen, right? That you achieve the stated goal, the political objective that you've been given. So I applaud you for in a lot of your criticisms of really focusing it really at the military level. That, at the end of the day, this comes down to execution, and it does start with planning. If you do not screen out courses of action that are bad, you are culpable for that outcome and your best military advice, you give a course of action that you know is going to be bad, you are 100% accountable for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Let me give you an example.
yep.
Let me talk about, so I'm not just talking trash here, okay?
I
And
know.
and I've done it myself. When I was a lieutenant colonel in Pakistan, the LNO cell, at nighttime I got this phone call because daytime in the U.S. And the problem was Pakistan was giving us fuels. We didn't talk about this, right? Bringing in fuel by aviation, it's like 8 pounds a gallon or whatever it is, right? It's just it's a huge effort. So I got a call, hey, arrange fuels from the Pakistani military. So I went to the Pakistani military. Hey, sir, we need fuel, and they asked me, what kind of fuel would you like? You know, I have no idea. I don't have a clue. So I said, what kind of fuel do you have? And they go, well, we've got JP5, JP7, JP9. In my little infantry brain, I'm thinking JP9 is the highest. It's got to be the latest version. So I said JP9, right? It turns out it's the right answer because you can put additives in it and use it for various different things, right? So they gave us fuel, and they gave us fuel to the tune of about $400 million worth,
Mm,
right? But then I get a call several months later. Hey, we're out of operational reserves, and we're gonna have to cut you guys off. So I reported to CENTCOM, and then a couple of weeks later, I get a call from DOD, Undersecretary of Energy or some shit, and he's like, "Hey, I need you to go to the Pakistanis and say that we can't pay them because of the Pressler Amendment, but we can give them soybeans, right?" And it just so happened because I knew history, Pakistan had actually purchased F-16s from us pre-Pressler Amendment. When Pressler Amendment happened, we kept their money. We didn't give them the F-16s. We gave them soybeans. So it's a sore subject.
mhm,
So I told him, and I explained that to him. I said, that's not going to go over too well. I'm not going to do it. So he said, no, I'm not asking you. Right? He's directing me as some civilian. So I said, well, I don't work for you. I work for CENTCOM, and I'm not doing it. And before I hang up on you, let me just get this one thought out. I said, now I realize why people around the world think we're a bunch of assholes because of people like you. And I hung up on him. Right? 10 minutes later, my general's phone rings, and my general's, he's like, Genghis, get in here. Did you just call some undersecretary? And I said, sir, I may have indirectly. I probably did. So I explained, he said, hey, in future, just let me talk to these guys. So my point being is, you got to push back, right? You're a military officer. You have a commission, a commission from the president of the Congress of the United States. That's our commission. I mean, it's only worth what you make out of it. But if you're going to bow down to some Poindexter, some staffer, and say, hey, because you're 2 desks removed from the Secretary of War, and you got a lot of, I don't give a shit if you sit next to him or you sit in his lap. When you're wrong, and stay out of my business.
mhm.
I trained for 20 years. I know how to kill. I know how to destroy things. You don't. If you want to do that, put a damn set of uniform on and come fight with me. Otherwise, get out of here. And that's the type of mindset we need. And I'm telling you, it's going to take a while to change that culture. But if American senior officers, generals were thought like that, and the politicians would back off. But what happens is we keep opening doors for them. We keep backing off, and because we're low testosterone,
Yeah.
and the troops expect you. They demand that you stand up for them and the military. But we've sort of abrogated all this to these bunch of Poindexters out of these Ivy League schools
Yeah.
and Babson probably.
Wellesley, Mass, beautiful town.
Yeah.
Not the place I would think that Genghis Khan
No.
would cut his teeth
Yeah.
academically, but I think that's
Well, Wesley
great, man.
College was pretty interesting.
Yeah. um, before we wrap up this segment, I want to go back to my time at the Naval Postgraduate School, which I had a couple of different postgraduate experiences. Naval Postgraduate School was the best education I got.
Yeah. Monterey.
It was
Awesome.
fantastic. One of
Yeah.
my
My
professors.
son went there, by the way. Just sorry. My
Oh, yeah.
son got a double E out
Oh,
of there.
he got his double E from there.
Yeah.
That's a very
Yeah.
prestigious program.
Yep.
Produce astronauts.
Yeah.
One of my professors there, a guy by the name of John Arquilla, just a brilliant man, saw things decades before they happened. He told us in a lecture one time that the model, I don't want to misquote him, so forgive me, John, Dr. Arquilla, if I do, but he mentioned that in Afghanistan, one of the eras where there was actually great stability was when I think it was King Najibullah was in
Yep.
power. That he felt that the monarchy model was a good model for Afghanistan. And it got me thinking about like reading The Prince, because I read The Prince in NPS as well. And one of the lessons from The Prince was that to rule effectively, you have to have the right ruling of edifice on top to make sure that the whole thing works. That if you have a mismatch, you don't have the right ruling edifice on top of society, you're not going to be able to lead effectively. You're not going to be able to govern. One of the things that really struck me during my one tour in Afghanistan was, man, we're almost like shoving liberal democracy down the throat of a people's that maybe it just didn't work. I wanted to kind of see how you react to that. Is that kind of jingoism on my part to assume that liberal democracy won't work in Afghanistan? Or do you think that we just dropped the ball in putting the right kind of setting the governing edifice in place that could have effectively brought stability to the people there?
Yeah, so I think, it's called mirror imaging.
Mhm.
We want everybody to look as we do, right? So that's
Right.
the first part. The first mistake we made was going to Afghanistan. The first step is very important. Sun Tzu talks about this. So that was the first mistake. By
Mhm.
setting foot in Afghanistan was a huge mistake, right? Obviously, the target was UBO, but we didn't find Bin Laden in Afghanistan. We ended up finding him in Pakistan, right? But yet we invaded a country, and that was 2011, and we stayed on all the way to another 10 years, right? So that's keep that in the back of the mind.
Mhm.
But my understanding is that Bush gave an ultimatum that they got 48 hours to hand over Bin Laden to the Taliban. And then we started bombing at the 40-hour mark. So there's still 8 hours. And my understanding is that the Taliban were negotiating to hand him over to a third country. Think about that. So was this a necessary or unnecessary war? I don't know. But we went in there for a reason, right? And the reason was that we wanted to unleash our military power. War is a racket, Smedley Butler, right? And to justify that, that we're going to build a nation in our image, nation building, right? And the problem with nation building is not everybody can afford what we have. It's just cost prohibitive and time prohibitive, right? A couple of reasons. The first problem with nation building was that everybody saw dollar signs, right? So all these, you know, Afghans that were in the United States could speak English that we could identify and communicate with. They flew back to Afghanistan because they knew they were going to get wealthy, and they did, right? Because those are guys we could interact with, right? So that's the first part. Second part is there's a lot of other people that came in there. The Turks. They sent like 65 construction companies to Afghanistan to get these. They knew these contracts are coming. So, they started, and generally all the construction contracts, most of them were won by the Turks because they had a system where the embassy would call all 65 of them in, and they'd say, okay, company, on top of the list, you're going to be the lowest bidder. Everybody else is going to bid high, and they were just going to rotate everybody back up so everybody wins, right? So it was like a pyramid scheme that they were running. So,
Mhm.
and it worked. I mean, they did good construction. They did great, right? So nation building is an expensive proposition, especially when you go to the Afghan villages and they're just using available mud and hay to build their homes, right? They didn't need high-rise buildings. They didn't need this first world infrastructure. They were very happy with their infrastructure. They just want to be left alone. Then to justify all this, we wanted to impose democracy on them, right? These societies and these cultures don't work on democracy. They work on clans and tribes and having one authoritative figure. UAE is a great example. You look at the sheikhs in the UAE. UAE is sort of a representative democracy where the word, everybody comes to the majlis in the evening and talks to the sheikh, and sheikh sits there and consults his inner circle and then makes a decision. But they want that. They want somebody that they can identify with, right? But what we want is we want to give everybody equal vote. Now you've got a country that at the time was, upwards of 80% illiterate.
Mhm.
They don't even understand the concept of democracy. And, we went there, my second tour to Oruzgan province to do what? To register voters. You look at the clip that Geraldo had, Mackenzie's talking about, we're here to register voters. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're out of your freaking mind. I'm not here to register voters. I'm here to pick a fight with somebody. It's that simple, right? That's what I trained for. I didn't train to run a freaking, election booth. That's not my job. You want to register voters, get somebody else. You want me to go hunt down, the enemy? I'll do that. I'm good at that. I don't know shit about registering voters. So what happened was he claims that we registered 30,000 voters. How did that turn out for you? Pretty shitty, right? And guess what? You don't have to register a single voter, because if John Muhammad Khan, the district governor, says, the provincial governor, the district chief says, go vote for this guy, guess what? I guarantee 100% of them will go vote for him, because that's how the system works, right? It's a very patriarchal system, and we shouldn't go undermine that system because it's outlasted democracy. Democracy is how old is democracy? 250 years, 300 years, roughly.
Yep.
These guys have been living for, thousands of years under a patriarchal system. And we're going to come in and tell them, hey, we got a better system. Democracy works for us if you have $36 trillion debt. Democracy is not going to work in a country, that doesn't have a strong economy, that's got no power, it doesn't have electricity, and it has no literacy. So any idiot that's promoting democracy is a freaking moron in my books, and he's doing us a disservice because he's taking money out of our pockets and sending it to corrupt people overseas.
Yeah.
That's wrong. It's bad analysis.
Yeah. And Genghis, just to put a bow on it, I was talking about this with my much better half the other day. At the end of the day, the American people wanted to see someone's head on a block after the towers fell. I would suspect that the government felt a very strong need to flex its military muscles to be able to demonstrate to the American people that we're taking the fight to the people, right? That we were doing it. And I try to remind myself of that when I form very critical ideas about our execution of the war in Afghanistan. I don't think that anyone. So I think that the mistake was made when we said, basically, we had this campaign of like punitive raids and this counterterrorism to break apart Al Qaeda, right? To go out and hunt those guys down and break their network apart. I think for me, it was really that point where we said, hey, let's make this let's try to reform Afghanistan in our own image. I personally believe that was the fatal flaw. We created something that wasn't going to work, and we created something that, quite frankly, that turned out to be very corrupt with narco terrorism. I think it had a lot of very negative knock-on effects. Not to mention, as you mentioned, the amount of money that we spent, money that we don't have. So that's kind of how I viewed it. I always felt that, looking back, counterterrorism operations to break apart Al Qaeda, and then basically turn it over to the Afghans to be able to rule it in the way that to rule it in their way, right? Which could have involved like a lot of war, fighting among factions, etc. But that's not really our problem.
Yeah, so I think fighting Al Qaeda was a legal issue. So back in 2001, when I was working in the embassy, there's a couple of things I proposed, and people thought I was nuts. The first one was, put these miniature reactors, at Bagram, and then become, 10. And at that time, Afghanistan's total megawatt requirement was about 10 megawatts, right? And then becomes a transmission distribution issue, right? Getting the power out to the remote areas. We got this reactor, and the reason, and people thought I was nuts. I said, we're going to be there for a long time. I said 40 years. I was wrong. We were there for 20. We could have been there longer, right? But we may end up back, so who knows? So that was one idea, right? Because it would have solved all this trucking issue, the fuel issue, and the Taliban making money on the sides by securing our, helping to secure our trucks by not attacking them. Think about that concept.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. The second part was, I wanted to not even invade Afghanistan. I asked for $1 billion a year. Give me $1 billion a year, and I'll find them. Right. And the reason being is, initially we had, the bounty on his head was like 5 million. I think we upped it to 15. Then we went up to 20, 25 million. Right. He can counter that. Right.
Counter that. Right.
I put $1 billion on your head. Somebody's going to invest 100 million to find your ass. I mean, it's that simple. Right. So a lot of times it's better to throw money at the issues rather than just because you have a toolkit doesn't mean you need to use all the tools, right?
Yep.
It's really that simple. So the problem is we're so amped up in a lot of and trust me, our special operation forces are phenomenal. They're incredible tier 1 units. I've worked with some of them. They really are. I mean, they're really impressive people, right? But we don't need to use them every time. Where's our special operations forces that use their brains rather than their brawns? Where are those guys at? The really smart guys that are coming up with these ideas, right? They're not. And I'll give you an example. Okay, forget the contractual side of this corruption. Let's just talk about the military side. Who's the idiot that came up with the plan to create the Afghan National Army in our image? It's going to be homogeneous, right?
Right.
When you know for thousands of years these guys, ethnic groups are fighting. So I had a couple of Afghan National Army units, under the BLT, you know, worthless. I hate to tell you that. The reason being is they were never accepted by the people in the South. They came in the South and they went in somebody's compound, and that started another side brawl, right? Because they've been rivals for thousands of years, and they were a greater threat to those locals than we were. So why didn't we come up with a plan like we did in Pakistan that the British had, where they had regional regiments, the Frontier Corps,
Hmm.
all the Pashtuns, Punjab Regiment, all the Punjabis, the Sindh Regiment, all the Sindh, Baloch Regiment, the Balochis. Why don't we think along those lines? So they're accepted in their region. No, but we're America. We're desegregated military. That's the way we got it. We got to create it. Bullshit. It didn't work. It
Yeah.
was complete freaking disaster. And half the people weren't even there that were paying. 30% of the military didn't exist, right? They didn't exist, but we're paying them. It's all bullshit, all of it. And nobody had the moral courage to stand up and say, you know what, this is wrong. It ain't working. Not a single general did that. Not a single general, that was there stood up and said that. They just kind of went along knowing, hey, I got a 1-year tour. Let me get the check in the box. I'll move to my next job.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Genghis, we're going to pivot to our final segment. It'll be kind of a
sure.
lightning round. Because a lot of this stuff is stuff that you talked about extensively on Sentinel. But before I do that, I just want to thank you for being so willing to be candid, and also want to thank you and all your Marines and all your teammates who just lifted. I don't think people really understand just how important your contributions were, not just in with the BLT, but also in the early days of this conflict. And being willing to share, I think, helps us this project become a professional development kind of tool is one of our goals, and I appreciate it. It's very good.
And I appreciate it. My only regret is I should have done it much sooner. But back then we didn't have the social media capabilities
Um,
we did, right? And I kept my mouth shut for obvious reasons. So I've sort of explained that.
yep.
But it needs to be done. I think any healthy organization needs to have this type of discourse, and it's not criticism. It's out of patriotism. Because I truly care about the Marine Corps. I truly care about the military and our service members. And that's why I speak out. I'll go back today. If you shit call me out, I'll go back and act duty right now, and I think I'll do okay. I'll be able to hang tough.
Yeah,
So
you could
please,
certainly out PT all the young guys today. I know that for a fact. The
today's my
legend of
day off,
Khan.
day of rest. Today's day.
All right, lightning round. We're going to talk a little bit about the need for reform in the United States military because you talk a lot about this, and I want people to go to Sentinel and listen to your videos because you have some very compelling ideas. Let me ask you a question off the top, kind of controversial. Why did Secretary Hegseth call all those generals to Quantico?
I think it's shameful. I'll tell you what. It's. I've never seen anything such shameful. For a couple of reasons. If I was a general officer, 4 stars sitting there, and I've got this civilian talking to me,
Mhm.
right? And a major in the National Guard talking to me and telling me about standards. I mean, think about how embarrassing that is. I think what Hegseth did was absolutely right, but I think it's shameful that we've gotten to the level that we have that he had to get on stage and say, you know what, get in shape, enforce standards. The beards part, here and there. So it was embarrassing for the military, in my opinion, and but it needed to be done. It was a wake up call. But guess what? They hit the snooze button. They went to snooze because 10 days after, when the Texas Army National Guard gets deployed to Illinois, we're literally pulling these heifers off the truck. You've seen that picture. Look how big, and they got the BDU uniform, and their guts are sticking out. And I'm just sitting there going, oh my God, the message didn't go out. And how do you get that message out? What does Exit do? He orders them back to Texas. Wrong answer. Wrong freaking answer. I would have called their adjutant general, get your ass up here to the Pentagon. I want to see you tomorrow morning, 08. Bring your lawyer with you because I'm fucking court-martialing your ass for disobeying my order. Now, I understand the role of the adjutant general, political appointee and all that stuff, but guess what? He's still under the UCMJ. Right? So until we start holding these generals accountable, this shit's going to go on because they're going to slow walk him. That's what they're doing. They know that the midterms are coming up. And they know that Congress may or may not turn over to the other side,
Yep.
And if that happens, all these programs are dead. The government's been shut down for literally, we're coming up on a month. and nobody's talking about it. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. Nobody's talking about any of this shit. And let me tell you something. We better wake the hell up, America. Okay, I'll be gone. I don't know if I got another year, I got 5 years or 10 years, okay, but I'll be gone. But let me just leave you with some words, okay? And these are facts that I'm talking about. Ambassador Burns just spoke, and I listened to him, and I listened to him carefully. Do you know that 34% of the Chinese college students are engineers? 34%. Now remember, they have a population about 4 or 5 times larger than ours, right? 34% of them. They're graduating about 1.4 million engineers a year. Okay, let's compare that to the United States. Data point, right? Facts with facts. Ours is 5.6% of our college students are engineers, right?
Wow.
We produce about 140,000 engineers a year. We can't get there from here, right? It will take us 10 years. If everybody stops and freezes in place, it'll take us 10 years to catch up to China, just in engineering, okay? For every 5 tradesmen that retire, every 5, they're retiring. Baby boomers like me, they're retired. They're getting old, right? We're only replacing 2. Now, how the hell are we going to build all these things that we want to build if you don't have the trade crafts? Okay? And the reason being is we don't have a national strategy for this. Everybody's just mired in divisive politics and horse shit. I mean, the latest I heard was Senator Tuberville, Coach T. I love the guy, right? But he came out with the latest thing that, hey, I've just enacted an amendment in Congress that every CDL licensed driver has to be able to speak English. And I looked at that and I'm like, well, what the hell is this guy talking about? I went and did some research. Guess what? Every CDL test is done in English, right? So what he's basically doing is throwing chum out to people as a distraction. Hey, coach, the government's been shut down for almost 4 weeks. Let's talk about that instead of you worrying about freaking CDL license. You got to be shitting me. Okay, and that's how these politicians have to be called out. But the problem is we're all just dumb and stupid. We're all sitting there like low testosterone and saying, okay, this is what Tuberville said, so okay, let's do that. So everybody jumps on that boat. It's bullshit. It's not who we are, okay? And I talked about the military doesn't meddle in politics, right? And politicians shouldn't meddle in military. I think that's so important. I understand civilian control. I uphold it 100%, but stay the hell out of my business. You send me in a fight, okay? You put me in that cage in the octagon. You're not going to be in there with me. It's just me and the other side, right? Let me fight the fight the way I want to fight it to win. That's what it's all about. And until general officers gross up, a pair of a nutsack, we're going to have this shit. I hate to bring this up like this, and it's such a nice show you got. I hate to talk like an infantryman, but it's really simple. And what the Secretary of War did that day, it's shameful that we got down to the level that we have gotten down to, where he had to stand up, in his fancy suit and tell us to raise standards. And then 10 days later, nobody got the message. Okay, how do we get better? And all this stuff. We got to select better commanders. We have to select better commanders. I've been talking about the three-track system. Technical guys should focus on flying. They should focus on cyber communications. Okay, then we need a staff track. Staff officers should be the best in doctrine and writing operations plans and things of that nature. What staff officers do. Not every staff officer can be a good combat leader, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the truth. Okay, and not all combat leaders can be good staff officers. I mean, that's also true. Patton wasn't a good staff officer. He's a great combat leader, right? And that's the way we got to approach it. And the last track is combat leaders. Okay, use people to their strengths. People that want to train Marines, they know how to train Marines, right? Use them to their advantage. I read a great article by a very renowned author, Goodmanson, that he talked about. We're creating people that are indecisive. They can't make decisions. They're waiting for somebody else to make the decision. The NCO is waiting for the staff NCO to make the decision. The staff NCO is waiting for the officer to make the decision. The officer is waiting for the field grade to make the decision. And we're just sort of mired in molasses. We can't be like that.
No.
And the reason we're like that is because we don't teach the art of decision making. And the way you teach the art of decision making is by failing. Okay, and until you accept failure, and you're not going to reprimand people for it, nobody's going to want to make a decision because they've become risk averse, right? And so we need to teach that to everybody. And here's another program I could talk about this, right? And in that article, he talked about how they're waiting in a live fire attack. They're waiting for the signal to come, and this and that, and all these restrictions that we put in there. That's how we start thinking. Think about it. And where's that come from? It comes from, CAX is a great example. CAX got these coyotes, this cadre that's going to maintain security or safety of the training unit. But guess what? In combat, you don't have a cadre.
Right.
In combat, you don't have a backstop. And so the only way you're going to learn is by doing it. By doing, and trust me, I'm not advocating anybody getting hurt. As a battalion commander, I never had a fracture site issue, right?
Mhm.
Never had a fracture site issue. But we trained hard. We trained live fire. We let people make decisions. And if something went wrong, guess what happened? We retrained right there and then until we got it right. So there has to be, an OODA loop cycle that we're talking about, or how to train and making sure that people will train properly and they're not going to get penalized for doing it.
Yeah. And Genghis, what you're talking about is completely relevant to what we think the future of warfare will require. Because what we're talking about are distributed units
Yes,
that could not, maybe aren't going to be able to communicate with one another, where the decision maker could very well be a very junior, non commissioned officer, having to make decisions based upon the commander's intent, right? But now, like, they're not gonna be able to call up to the boss because they're gonna be getting jammed, right? They're gonna
yeah,
have to learn how to survive without logistics for an extended period of time. That requires, like, very high level decision making skills. They can't be relying upon their logistics. They can't be relying upon their boss to get guidance. They're gonna have to make decisions themselves to survive.
100%, 100%. And our culture needs to be is to teach, test, fail, fail, fail. That's the big operative word. I want you to fail. Find out what the envelope bursts, right? Where's the breaking point on this decision? Okay. And then once you fail, then I want to retest you. Do it again.
Mhm.
Okay. Until we keep expanding that boundary. Because learn to fail in training is so important because you don't want to fail in combat. But the problem is we don't want to fail in training because everybody's scared. Hey, I'm going to look bad in front of the boss. Something's going to happen. This is going to happen. Shit's going to happen. I get all that. But we need to be mature enough and adult enough to realize that we're training to failure. We're not training to success. I want to succeed in combat, but in training, I want to fail. And
Yeah.
that's what I should tell my Marines. I want to find out the breaking point in anything we do. But if you don't have that type of mindset, it doesn't happen because everybody's, just standing around their fancy uniforms and all that stuff, trying to look good. I don't buy into that bullshit.
Do you think that 2 years is enough time for a commander? Or do you think now?
No, no, I can hold a shit for 2 years,
Mhm.
and let me explain. Okay, basically what happens is because of Goldwater-Nichols Act, 1986, everybody had to be joint designated, and I believe we talked about that, right? So the joint designation became paramount. Not language skills like we talked about, not cultural skill. You had to work on the joint staff to get that little shield that you wear in the uniform to let everybody know, hey, I'm joint qualified. Fuck off. I don't. I'll tell you what. I'm in my 20 some years, I never set foot in the Pentagon. And I'm so freaking glad I never did, right? Because I would have just it just to me it was like catching COVID.
Mhm.
So these joint designated guys come out there because they need to get promoted. They also need command time. So what they do is they get command selected because they've been the nose is up some general's butt, and then they get. I'm serious. I mean, you get a fitness report from a 3-star. You're somebody, man. You're gonna get it. Brief up. So they get a command selected, and they come to the units, and I've seen it firsthand. Okay, they're just holding their shit for 2 years. So no incident happens. So they get to check in the box and they go back to their staff job. So 2 years is not enough. And that's why we need a full-time combat commanders track that these officers, all they do is they're training, right? Marines or training soldiers, and they're in command. That's all they do. They're in back, or obviously school also to intermingle and build that cohesion. I get all that, right? But you need full-time commanders. Commanders is not a 2-year job. Commanders a lifelong commitment. That's what you need. And so any idiot that thinks you can pull somebody out of the Pentagon and send him down to a battalion and he can do a night attack is full of shit. It ain't gonna happen. I know commanders. I'm not gonna name. Well, you could probably figure out who it is. Okay. They used to have PT, battalion PT, right? Once a week, you'd have battalion PT, right? Because it's kind of mandated. Everybody's out there PTing, so they want to see you. But the Marines have to tuck in their green T-shirt into their green shorts. When the battalion commander comes out with his shirt untucked, and why do you think his shirt is untucked? Because he's fat. He's exactly what Hegseth is talking about. And when this guy got promoted, guess what? He was a fat general. Exactly what Hegseth was talking about. So we need commanders that young troops will idolize. They say, "I want to be this man." That's the type of people we're looking for.
Yep.
We're not looking for these gummy bears, munchkins that show up out of nowhere. And as a young troop, I mean, you wonder what the hell the troop is thinking,
Yeah.
looking at this guy. You know?
Speaking of commander's business, I want to pivot to something that I know is near and dear to you, and that is barracks and chow halls.
Oh God.
Fire
You,
away,
you
man.
don't don't get me started. I'll tell you what. We have abrogated our responsibility as leaders, as staff NCOs, as sergeants majors, as first sergeants, okay? By allowing our barracks to end up the way they are. And because they ended up the way they are, what's the solution we find? Hey, let's contract them out to some civilian puke, right? And it's horseshit. It's nonsense. Okay? I'll tell you what, when we were in the Marine Corps, my time, our barracks were always spotless. You did unannounced walks, you did formal inspections, and it wasn't to harass the Marines, it was to make sure maintenance was done right. Your police sergeant would be there to logbook, and you're checking everything is tagged, and you're checking everything and making sure it's being done. If it ain't been done, you turn to the first sergeant or sergeant major. Hey, call base facilities and get it done, and report back to me that it's been done. And the Marines see that, and they go, "Holy shit! The commander gives a shit about my barracks." Then they take care of the barracks. So that's the first part, right? And the second part is the chow halls. I mean, you got to be shitting me. I mean, our chow halls run by, I believe, Supreme or Cisco or some other, and they're doing it for money. They're doing it for money. I did an episode on Sentinel on how bad the chow was. There's a picture of a toast and some lima beans on a tray because of the base in Wyoming ran out of money, and that's what they're feeding the troops. The Army just was called out in the same episode. They took like $14 million out of the Chow Hall Fund, and the money disappeared. This is the Marines, the troops' money. It's a basic allowance of sustenance. That's their money. Why did the Army reallocate it? Why did the Marine Corps reallocate their funds for barracks to operational commitments? And now they're saying, "Oh, we're so sorry we did that." Bullshit. Your first responsibility is to your troops' welfare. And that's what it's all about. If you don't have good barracks and you don't have officers and staff NCOs going to the chow hall every day, every meal, you're going to have problems. And that's the fundamental issue. The issue is not handing it over to some civilian, come in and do your damn job. It's you got to get your staff NCOs and officers in the chow hall at breakfast, at lunch, and at dinner. Not an officer doesn't have to eat all three meals there every day. But one officer can go there for breakfast, one officer staff NCO can go there for lunch, one can go for dinner, and you got to have a logbook entry. And the CO and or the sergeant major has to read this stuff. And I did it as a lieutenant. We used to have a sword. Back then, the officer of the day would have a sword. We'd formally walk around with this freaking sword dangling all over us, which was, ridiculous. But I remember going into the chow hall, and I'd have to take off the sword because you weren't allowed to have the sword back there where the burners and all that shit was. It's something might flip over, right? And doing my job. I mean, that's what we get paid to do. That's what we get paid to do. And I'll tell you another thing I'd get rid of. I'd get rid of all these damn fast food places that MWBR is making money, for profit. It's bullshit. It's destroying our military. That's why Texas Army National Guard is so damn fat. Okay, because they're eating crappy food for money, for profit. I would have literally, these guys, being in the infantry, I can talk to, right? You're considered a world class athlete, right? You have the same nutritional demands, same protein demands, all that happy horse shit. And but we don't feed you like that.
Mm-hmm.
We give you some nasty ass meal that's not. I don't even think a nutritionist even looked at it, right? But they should be, and it should be always available. We used to have barbecue packs, right? With the chow hall. We cut a deal, barbecue packs, where Marine could go in there and get us 2 hamburgers. If it was steak that night, he'd get a steak. And we had grills set up in the quad where the Marines could go and, cook their food and hang out and then, have a barbecue night. Little things like that. It doesn't take much if you give a shit. But if you're going to hand over that responsibility to the civilians, you're going to have problems. And I think it's a damn disgrace that we're allowing this to happen. And I'll tell you what, I'm kind of, and I'm going to do another episode on this because I think Hexet needs to really attack this thing. He talked about, setting up a task force.
Yep.
You don't need a task force. Just get 3, 4 smart guys, put them in a room, come up with a 1-page document. This is our plan. Let's execute. Task force gets mired, right, in studies and all this happy horse shit. But this is a serious, serious issue. And it's not only that, there's also base housing for our young troops. It sucks. I'll get a commanding general, when he goes to his base housing, the entire place is repainted, right? Because Mrs. General wants a nice, freshly painted house. Lance Corporal goes to the base house with his, with his family. They don't even repaint it. There's a 5-year cycle sometimes. 5 years, every 5 years they'll paint that house. Why are the two treated differently? Are the two families different? No, we're all Americans, right? Everybody should be treated the same. That's my feelings on it.
Thanks for that, Genghis, and I strongly agree with you on that point. You know, I saw the secretary's memo and I reacted the same way. The very word task force is very triggering for me. But you know what's also triggering? This past week, I was at the Association of the US Army's annual event
Oh,
in
yeah.
DC, and they talked about this. And I was a little dismayed to hear discussions about like outsourcing some of this stuff to contractors. I mean, maybe there's a role for it for certain types of things. But at the end of the day, the message this is commander's business. This is command sergeant major's business, right? To make sure this stuff is done correctly and the resources need to be made available to them to be able to take care of their troops. And I remember when I first joined the military, you know, I was in charge of the battalion dining facility and I was held accountable for it. I mean, I put on my cook whites, I did inspections. I ate with the troops because I wanted to that was how I made sure that things stayed on track. And I'm very concerned that we're losing that, and I feel that that's where we kind of lost our way there. Um, I want to talk to you a little bit about. You mentioned earlier you want to come back to the idea that the United States doesn't win wars anymore, and I want to talk to you about that. Like we haven't won a war since Desert Storm, right?
Yeah, we have it, and there's reasons for that, right? And the problem is that we keep blaming our political masters, right? When the political masters need to, and they need to be smart. They need to just back off a couple of steps, and our senior military leadership needs to step forward a couple of steps, right? And so what we do is we rotate people like Afghanistan. You can make the point was 1 year war fought 20 times over,
Mhm.
right? We don't make the commitment like we used to in the Pacific theater or the European theater, where you go there for the duration, right? Even if you get wounded, you're going to rehab there and get back on the firing line, right? Now what we do, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year rotation, and you just lose so much experience. It's just like having commanders for 2 years, right? So I fundamentally believe that when you decide as a nation to go to war, it's a serious proposition because there's human lives involved in this, right?
Mhm.
And you got to do it the right. There's only one way to do it, the right way. There's no other way to do it. And if you're not doing it the right way, then somebody's got to raise their hand and say something is wrong. Now, if you go harken back to the Korean War, when Truman started meddling in affairs, right? And we can debate on MacArthur and all that stuff, right or wrong. But here's an army major is making strategic decisions when the guy that's paid to make strategic decisions is being sidelined. And the same thing happened in Vietnam. When Johnson was picking targets, that's how the Situation Room came about. Was picking targets
Mm.
on a map inside the White House. I mean, you got to be shitting me. I know General had the moral moxie, courage, the courage to say this is wrong. What the hell are you doing? You're the president. Do your president stuff. Leave it to me. I got it, right? But we don't have these people with the stout-hearted men with a strong backbone that are willing to push back a little bit. And I'm certainly not advocating that the military, constitutionally it's under civilian control, but the Constitution doesn't say politicians can meddle in the military. So I think that's so damn important, right? That we need to sort of make sure that we're doing that. And like, and my hats off to Hexet. I've spoken out against Hexet, because of his behavior issues, you know, and although that this his speech was a publicity stunt in my opinion, but much needed. I agreed with it. I agreed with everything he said, and a lot of people thought that I'd written the speech. I hadn't. I had nothing to do with it, but I do know that people in his office watch Sentinel, so a lot of these discussions from comments, they watch channels like yourselves and other people, because people are speaking out, and I think it's a good thing that we're speaking out, right?
Yes.
And we all want the best for our children. We all want the best for our nation. We want to win the next war. Now, the question is, we don't know what the next war is going to look like. But I've been hearing this force development 2030 bullshit that we've carved away with artillery batteries and battalions and regiments in the Marine Corps. And guess what? 2 days ago, when they had this big ceremony in California, when they shut down the highway to fire artillery across, they land on the beach to fire artillery. But the force development 2030 concept is using rockets. I didn't see any rockets being fired. They were using artillery. So if I was J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, I'd say, you guys just spent hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars on selling me firing rockets and using rockets and do it with artillery. Why the hell am I seeing artillery out there? But nobody does this critical thinking. Nobody talks like that.
Mhm.
And I would jack up the commandant of the Marine Corps, say, "What the hell is going on here?
Yep.
Something is not making sense. Either your concept is broken, right, or we got an execution problem. Tell me which one is it. And you better tell me, like, in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to fire your ass."
Yep.
You know, that's the type of language these people understand, and they're going to react to it. And nobody's asked the question: why do we have artillery on the beach and shut down, I-5? Everybody's talking. Even the governor of California is bitching about, hey, we shut down a major highway for the Marines. Well, what happened to the rockets? I mean, it's a simple question.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And I think if we really truly want to, we got to get back to the basics, man. We got to just get better. Our troops are awesome. Before going into Afghanistan, I used to always get, sir, Generation X, Generation Y, whatever the hell they're not like the old core Marines. I'm telling you, they're just as good. All it takes is the right type of leadership. But the leadership doesn't start in combat. It starts back at Camp Lejeune, how you train them. You're training a fighter, right, for the big fight. So it doesn't matter. By the time he gets to the rink, man, it's all the work, all the reps he's put in there before. And as long as we do that, I think we're gonna we have the best equipment, we got the best training, and we got the best troops. We just got to improve our senior leadership. And I think our company grade officers are fantastic. Our staff and COs are fantastic, but they're handcuffed, right,
Mhm.
by these senior leaders. They turn into politicians.
So, Genghis, this has been a fantastic conversation. You've made my Sunday, and I want to thank you for taking 2 hours out of your Sunday to
Yeah,
join me
absolutely.
today. You're a great guy, and I hope to have you on board again at some point.
Anytime.
And I am a huge
Anytime.
supporter of Sentinel, as you and I discussed earlier. Um, Not everything comes out of your mouth I agree with, but I listen to everything and apply a lot of thought to it because I respect you, and I think that your intentions are to make the military better. And I think that diversity of thought and critical thinking and good discussions among one another is very important that us veterans can do, so we can help the institution progress its reforms that you and I both know are needed.
I agree with you, Hunter. I don't speak up because I want you to agree with me.
Mhm.
I want you to disagree with me, come up with a better idea.
Yep.
All I'm doing is priming the pump. That's it. I mean, you talked about the counterinsurgency manual. Was
Yeah.
it FM 324?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what a crock of horse shit. It was a publicity stunt. It was nonsense, right? And I'll tell you very simply. I mean, give me 2 minutes. We can talk about it, right?
Go for it. I want.
Because right off the bat, it assumes competent, ethical leadership. It's assuming that you're in Afghanistan, that the leadership of that country is competent, ethical, right? That's the first thing it's assuming. And the next thing it talks about this strategy of isolate, clear, and hold, right? Basically, right?
Mhm.
That's what they're
Your
doing,
whole
right?
build. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. But here's the issue with that. Okay. What are you doing it for? Okay. You're basically destroying a mud hut to build what? They're happy with mud huts. Let them be. Right? So the whole thing doesn't make sense. And what you're trying to isolate, you got to isolate them. Now, the one thing I do like about it is focus on the population, right?
Mhm.
That's a center of gravity, right? And it talks about good stuff about ethical leadership and all that stuff, right? I get all that. Just don't randomly kill people. I get it because you're creating more enemies. That's all the good part. But here's the issue. How do you isolate an insurgent group from the population? It never really talks about that. It just talks about going in there, conventional military, separating the two, okay? But in the modern battlefield, guess what? How do you digitally isolate them? Everybody's got a cell phone. Physically, you isolated them, but digitally, Gaza is a great example. For 2 years, we bombed the shit out of that place. We dropped more bombs on there than we did on Hiroshima, tonnage-wise, you know.
Mhm.
And guess what happened? Their resolve remained strong. So this manual, at the end of the day, I think it was much needed, But if your host government is corrupt, Afghanistan is an example we can talk about, right? It ain't gonna work because
Mhm.
people don't have trust in that government. If you're promoting democracy as the ultimate goal, it ain't gonna work. We talked about that, right? And then it relies heavily on civil military cooperation, the build part, right? Okay, and we talked about this. The USAID, they're paying $65,000 for a well. We were paying 4,000. Their timelines are different. Their priorities are different, right? And also, I believe it relies upon the added ratio 20 to for every 1,000 population. 20 soldiers, military for every 1,000, right? Do the math. For Afghanistan, that'd be 500,000
Yep.
for the Afghan population, right?
Yep.
But here's the issue with that. But then you're creating that 500,000, the ANA, Afghan National Army, in our image,
That's right.
which doesn't work. They hate them. They become the enemy.
I'm no scholar, Genghis, you know that. I'm not a big brain, but one of the things I'm pretty firm on is I don't think that counterinsurgency at an industrial scale can ever work until
No,
I'm
not at
proven
all.
wrong. And that was always my issue with I had 2 issues with FM 324 with hindsight.
Yeah,
First off, I didn't think it was usable by soldiers. I thought it read more like an academic thing than something that could be used, taught in our institutional army. I didn't understand it, and I had more degrees than a thermometer.
yeah.
It was very booky and very big brained. The second issue I had with it is that it was promoting an idea that you can do counterinsurgency on such a large scale for a nation state. And I'm sorry, like I remain
See,
unconvinced that it can work.
well, but no, but it failed. When it was tested, it failed. It failed in Iraq and it failed in Afghanistan, right?
Yep.
And the main reason it fails is just like you're talking about, the implementation. How do you implement this thing beyond the schoolhouse? We can sit around the command and staff colleges, the war colleges, and talk about it. How great it is. Mattis and Petraeus did such a bang up job and all that stuff. But you can't get it down to the troops. Something simple as SURF funds. Do squad leaders have access to them? Platoon commanders have access to them? Company commanders have access? No. It's at the battalion level. But you're doing distributed operations. You got a squad sitting in a village. They got no funds.
Yep. And if anyone who doesn't agree with us, that's fine. We please comment below and push back.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
we're happy to take the
Absolutely.
feedback.
Right.
But I would also encourage everyone who thinks that it is an effective approach just to go back to John Sopko's cigar reports. I mean,
Yeah,
any that should be required reading, those cigar reports.
absolutely.
It should make every military professional, every American's blood boil. See, the fact that that's not talked about more, I think is quite telling. But
Because we're trying to cover it up. I think in officer promotion, we have to, objectively test them through simulation, their tactical decision making, test their knowledge. I would give them a test on the cigar report, 20 questions,
mhm,
right? To see if they've even read the damn thing, and they haven't. I'll guarantee they haven't, right? And so these are the type of things, institutional changes we need to make them relevant and focus on. We're focused on Napoleonic Wars back there when we got to focus on the future.
yeah,
And until we do that, we're not going to change. I'm all about physical and mental toughness. Don't get me wrong, right? It's the foundation of military discipline at the end of the day. But officers have to focus on relevant and practical training, ideas and standards that makes us more lethal in battle. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what we're all about, to gain an advantage over our adversaries. And the best way to do that, I still have figured out, is operate at night, right? Because there's a human sleep cycle. There's a rhythm, right? And how many units train at night? I'm not talking just for training evolution.
mhm,
That their daily battle rhythm is at night.
yep,
They come to work in the evening at
yep,
sunset and go home in the morning. Special operations units do it, but how many infantry units do it? They don't, because we don't want to get outside our comfort zone. But we need leaders that are willing to take us outside our comfort zone. You know, but we don't. And until we get that type of leadership, we're going to continue making the same mistakes. So it's going to be About Face was written, and there's so many books written, and it's during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And this my thing is coming out. Betrayal of Command is coming out, and I talk about the same shit that was written in About Face, and it's just pissing me off every time I'm sitting there typing away the words and thinking, man, I remember this, and we didn't learn a damn thing, and and so doing, we failed those that we lead, those that trusted us,
yep.
and that's a violation of our code, in my opinion.
Yes,
And on
sir.
that note, I salute you, and anytime you want me back, I'd be happy to. No
Be
problem.
honored. And just to end it, Genghis, I want to wish happy birthday to you and to your other rest of your Marines for the 250th. It's belated, of course, but once a Marine, always a Marine. Semper Fidelis, and happy birthday to you and the rest of your teammates.
Hoorah!
All right,
Thank you.
take care.
Semper Fi.